plenty of weird stories I can get into if
Good.
need be.
Yeah,
So
please do. All right, and we are live. Hello, Pete Davis.
yeah,
Welcome to the Banter House. Before we get into the actual kind of musical part, I wanted to ask you about
thank you.
your quote unquote real job, which is a flavor chemist, which is something I'd never heard of until I read your bio.
Yes, that is true. hmm yeah, yeah. Basically, that's what I do to actually make money. I design flavors for food products. Yeah, that's basically it.
That's real
it's
cool.
a thing that most people don't know exists. Um, yeah, and it's neat sometimes. Yeah,
How does one become a flavor? I mean, I assume I know you went to school for chemistry, but how do you
correct.
get
Yeah.
into specifically flavor chemistry?
You don't have to have a degree in chemistry.
Oh,
Actually, I happen to, but you could any kind of science is generally it's kind of what they look for because it's more of a it's more of like a blend of kind of an art and science together. So really, anyone can do it. It's basically you come in and there are several thousand singular raw materials that smell a certain way and
hmm.
taste a certain way, and you basically come in every day and you taste those and you learn what they taste like and you learn how they mix together. You learn how to make flavors, and that's it. So yeah, my whole thing was when I went to like I said, went to school for chemistry. I was like a senior or like a junior senior in college, and I just felt like this is really boring. Like like I found the science of it cool, but it's like do I want to show up and like make Teflon every day? Like no, I
Mm,
don't care about Teflon.
mm.
You know what I mean? So like the practical application of what a chemist does was not interesting to me at all. And so I was like, what the heck am I going to do for, however many years I'm going to live after this, whatever. And so then I discovered like, oh, I could do food science. Food science is pretty cool because you can eat the stuff you work on. So I was like, all right, well, that's cool. And then basically from there, so the whole thing started, and forgive me, I'm doing a little thing on my computer behind me right here, but there we go. And so I get that extra lighting from that
Nice. Yeah.
white window on my computer. um, yeah, but basically, so I was like, I um, I learned about this single chemical called benzaldehyde that smells like maraschino cherries or almond paste. And I don't
Oh,
know if most people don't realize those are the same smell, but like
huh.
the smell of almond paste has this really cherry, like candy cherry quality to it. The chemical called benzal. So once I was doing like I was sorting some stock room or something, sorting the chemicals, and I found this bottle of benzaldehyde, and I had read, like, oh, this is cherry, and I smelled it, and I was like, oh my god, this is the coolest thing ever. So basically, from there, that inspired the journey to try to do this for a living.
Very
And
cool.
so yeah,
Yeah, that's
that's
awesome.
yeah, that's where I'm at.
Cool.
So, but yeah, the short answer is you have to know somebody in the industry. It's the only way to get in.
All
So
right. Okay. All right.
yeah.
The underground world of food chemistry, I guess.
Yeah. So if
Um,
somebody's really trying to do it, reach out to me and then
all right.
maybe I'll
Well,
do my best.
well, it's probably about time
Yeah.
I got a real job, Pete. So maybe no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So that talking
How's
about,
your nose?
I don't know. I average, I guess.
Yeah. That actually doesn't matter.
Oh,
Yeah, it doesn't matter because you train. So
sure.
it can be totally normal. You just train every day. That's how
Right.
you do it.
I
It's the
got you.
same as like playing a hard song. Yeah.
Cool. So, I first discovered your music, yeah, I'd say about a month and a half or two ago. Somebody posted when the tallest tree collapsed. That video
Okay.
on the Listen to This
The
subreddit.
cello.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the and
I see
the
the cello in the back.
yeah, and the well,
hmm
I am a cellist. That's my main
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And so I hit play, and one of the first things you see is you tapping on the cello. And as someone who's always liked metal and has always been interested in the
yeah.
tapping thing, and of course somebody who loves the cello, I was just like, I
Mhm.
didn't ever think about doing this. Um,
Yeah.
And then of course that kind of led me into the I listened to the False Friends EP after that, which is a fantastic album, by the
Hmm.
way. And I it's funny
Thank you.
because it's so sparse as far as what you're actually using. It's just your voice and the ukulele, pretty much,
Hmm.
right? I mean,
Right.
there's some extra stuff
Yeah.
in there, I think, but it wasn't like until like I think the third or fourth
No,
time
that's
listening
it.
through that I
Yeah.
realized, oh, this is just voice and this is just voice and ukulele. But you managed to
Yeah.
achieve such a full sound with just your voice, and that seems to be a theme for your music, is having these sometimes really dense vocal harmonies. Um, and
Hmm.
it's really interesting to me because like you never went to school for music, and so there's this trope that I don't believe in, by the way, but there's this trope
No.
that, like, if you're a musician who never like formally studied, you're going to be kind of gravitating toward these really simple structures and harmonies, and that's pretty much the opposite of your work.
Uh-huh.
So also
Yeah.
interesting is you have a lot of music of your solo stuff out that actually goes back pretty far. So like listening through your discography, it's like you
Yeah. I've
can
been
it's like I can see this like progression. So like getting into things like, kind of really complicated harmony, like how do you go about that as somebody who, yeah, doesn't really have formal training and manages to do that super successfully?
so the thing with training is like I was I've always been very, very nerdy about music. And I have an older brother, and he played bass when we were growing up. So I played guitar, and like we would play music together. And so he and I kind of started to develop this vocabulary, how to communicate with each other about music and about song structures and things. And basically, we didn't realize it, but we were sort of like teaching ourselves music theory. And so we were kind of
Mm.
like using scale degrees to communicate with each other. So, and it all stems 100% from like pop punk.
Huh.
Like I picked up the guitar when I was 11, literally to play Blink 182 songs. Like that was, I heard Dude Ranch by Blink
Uh-huh.
182, and I was like emotional about it. I was like, I need to do this. Like I need to play guitar. It was 100% the album that got me into guitar, at least. Um, but like all my life, and I'm pretty blessed to have a pretty good ear, because kind of I've always had like a piano around me. Like my parents they're not musicians, but they were very like encouraging of music and very into the idea
Mm.
of it. So we always had a piano. I had like a little keyboard thing, and just they were encouraging, like as a kid, to, yeah, play with this. It's a toy. Play with music, right? Play with an instrument. So I remember being really young, and I would, like, first time I played Final Fantasy 6 when I was like really small. I probably played it. I'm pretty old. I'm like 30. I can, like, think I was playing Final. I remember, like, I would play the game, and then I would sit at my piano, and I would kind of be messing around. And I would notice, like, wait a minute, this sounds like
Mm.
the theme at this part of the game. And then
Mm.
I would sit there and kind of figure out, like, okay, no, that note's not right. It's like, oh no, it goes like this. And then like I would get the whole melody to it.
Mm.
And so like just sort of exercising that without realizing it, exercising that kind of ear training uh, on my brother and I music, that kind of like taking sort of the way I understood between the sound and the notes and everything, and into a way that we could represent it with words. And so we use
Mm.
numbers. And so we
Mm.
would say, and essentially we made scale degrees. And I don't know, maybe he took bass lessons, and maybe like he got this kind of from a teacher, and then kind of trickled it down to me. I don't remember where we started from.
Mm.
Basically, like, we'd come up with like a chord progression or something. And for like, some very simple, like kind of pop punk thing or something. But, it'd be like, 1 4 6 5, right? And I could say that and be like, okay, cool. And then like the third time through, do like 1 4 3 6
Mm.
instead, right? And
Mm.
so like that's kind of how we talk to each other.
Mm.
And I think that was basically the basis of how how I stared to learn, like, kind of music theory without formal training. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Yeah.
just sort of trying to figure it out. And I've gathered enough sort of like stray pieces here and there of like proper terminology and proper, like, what you would actually learn in the courses. I've just never taken one. But It was so ingrained in me from say it's like a language. It's like something that's just very natural that I don't even think about. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like if I hear something being played, I can generally know what it is. You know what I mean? Know
right.
what notes are being played
Uh-huh.
if it's not super complex. You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean? But
yeah, for sure.
yeah, so it's just sort of this. So I mean, and to get to answering your actual question about the harmonies, right? Um, so basically, it just stems from like listening to pop punk right as a kid, 20 years ago. I always loved the vocal harmonies. It was always my favorite part. So especially, and then I started to get into bands and religion that would like really focus on like bigger harmonies
Mm,
and like like 3 notes, 4 notes, stuff like that. And then I just loved the way it sounded, and so I wanted to experiment with that. And just through all my life, I've tried to build more and more and more and more. And recently, um, just sort of doing all of this composition, I kind of am starting to understand more strange chords and like relationships that I
mm,
between notes that I wouldn't have thought of before.
mm.
And yeah, and just kind of from there, that's sort of how False Frenzy P came out. Like trying to make really dense cluster chords
Mm.
and make like to try things melodically that I've not really tried before, and just make things sound ugly
Mhm,
briefly so that there's like a resolution when they come become pretty again,
mhm.
like that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I don't necessarily always know exactly what I'm doing, but I kind of like I know the feeling I'm trying to do, and so like I'll put like maybe 8 notes together and be like, okay, like I don't know what this chord is, but I hear it. You know what I mean? Like I hear
Yeah.
what it sounds like, and I hear that like this should resolve to that, this should resolve to that.
Mhm.
I don't know what you classify it as, but I kind of that kind of thing. So that's sort of where I start. But and I do everything in like in this very old RAM called Tabit. I don't know if you saw anything about that, but
I did, yeah.
Tabit is like a guitar tablature program, and I have everything. So in acapella,
So, hey, Pete. Hey,
right?
sorry.
It's all on
Hey, Pete.
guitar.
Hey,
I'll
Pete.
use like voice or something.
Hey, Pete. So
But
I lost you
yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah,
I lost you right as you were talking about what
yeah.
tab it was. Can you say what you said again
Oh,
about
okay.
tab it? Because I
Am I back? Is everything okay?
yeah, yeah, you're back. It just kind of faded out for a
Yeah,
hot second.
yeah, no problem. Oh, okay, yeah. So basically, Tabit is like this guitar tablature program, like a MIDI sequencer, and I still write everything in Tabit. So like even acapella songs
Mm,
are all in like a bunch of guitar staffs. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it's not like I barely know how to read music like on a staff. You know,
Wow.
it takes me I'm very slow.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, so I think I do it more in kind of like guitar like MIDI or something like that. And so that's how I would write like an acapella song is entirely in just multiple lines. Like I'll use a clarinet to represent
Huh.
the vocals or something,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. Yeah.
I really like this that the idea that like you were just kind of encouraged from a young age to sort of just explore, just play, just mess around, without having sort of any sort of like, well, you've got a lesson next week, you got to practice for that, um, or in this kind of way that's like, here's the way to do it, here's the right way to do it, um, but instead more of this sort
Yeah.
of sandbox approach, this kind of playground thing, and that's I had some of that when I was a kid, but I was in music lessons, like private lessons from like I think 11 or 12 probably. Um, and it's a different environment to learn that stuff. I mean, I think it can be just as productive and just as fun and healthy eventually, but it's different to just sort of get
Hmm.
cut loose and just like, here, figure it out.
Yeah.
Just go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, after False Friends, I ended up listening to I listened to the album that's all a cappella. I think it's just called the a cappella album or something like that. And then tentatively self-titled. And then I
Uh
listened
huh.
to Pottsville Conglomerate, which is I think that was the
Hmm.
album that really made me go, all right, I need to fucking listen to this guy. Like, I really need to listen to this guy. Because first of all, like, it's a long album. It's an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's 95 minutes.
it's 95 minutes,
Yeah.
which is really, really long. And I found myself going, oh, what song is this? Oh, cool, that's that song. And then I'd be like, oh, I like this one. What song is this? It's the same freaking song. Are you serious?
Yeah.
There's just
Yeah.
there's so much packed into it, and in like a really good way. Like, I mean, I remember finishing Chrysopia, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, the last track of the album.
Yeah. I
Um,
I think that's right. Yeah.
and then going, I gotta listen to this again. And I immediately listened to it a second time. Um, would
Pardon me
you?
one sec.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm
Would
still here. I just
would you call Pottsville Conglomerate a concept album?
yes,
Okay.
definitely. So it's definitely like one sort of overarching story that kind of goes through the whole thing. And you know, sometimes it's sort of convoluted as to what's really going on at any given moment.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely like there's sort of a theme and characters and everything like that, that's intended.
Hmm. Yeah.
Whether or not, you know, that succeeded and how clear that was. But yeah, I for my solo stuff that I was, you know, working on when I was younger, I often did that a lot. I would have sort of this general idea of like a story and a setting that I wanted to convey, but then it wasn't like super like strict in kind of like, you know, telling a story or something, having it really obvious what's going on. And with Pottsville, I really kind of I tried to like a little more sort of like, you know, like with the imagery and just
Hmm.
the different, you know, kind of mentions of other characters and stuff. But yeah,
There's a
I don't
very
know. But then the
there's a
go
very Twin Peaks nature to the storytelling of that album. Um, I don't
uh,
know if that was at
um,
all
um,
an inspiration or not, but
yeah, I'm definitely a David Lynch fan, so I think
cool.
that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's I mean, I may be wrong about this, so you know, please correct me. Just
Mhm.
from listening to the album, it seems like there may even be an issue. Not, or I shouldn't say an issue, but um, it's like it's not always clear that it's not clear that you're listening to like a linear story. Um,
Right.
that you may in
Yeah,
fact
jumps around.
be jumping around as far as time. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
like I think is it internment? There's a line that kind of it's something about like you've been missing for a day, but then it says that we've been looking for you for weeks or something like that. I think to that effect.
Uh-huh.
And
Right.
it's so wonderfully confusing. I really love it. So I think that I have an idea of what the story is, but I'd really
Well,
love to
good.
hear.
Yeah.
I'd really love to hear, if you don't mind,
Okay.
if you could explain the story. And I'm just curious to see if what I picked up matches up at all.
Uh-huh. I mean, to be honest, I'm curious how you perceive it
Mm,
first. Like, I'm curious how a listener who hasn't, you know, who has no idea, because I have no idea. Because like for me, like I kind of visualize everything, and so like some things are obvious to me, right? But
hmm.
I have no idea how well it's conveyed. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean,
Sure.
what do you think? And like,
Okay.
I won't make fun of however you know you
Sure.
if it's wacky, but I don't think it will be.
Well, okay, so it seems like there's a little bit of almost like an old kind of like maybe early mid 20th century sort of setting, like Appalachian kind of style, like hymnal. Has such like a it's such a religious sounding tune, and
Mhm.
and there seems to be like a thread of sort of religious narrative through it, but in a way that's very distinctly Appalachian in the sense that there seems to be like some hint of Christianity in there, but there also seems to be a little bit of sort of this like, you know, almost pagan kind of element to it. So the story that I pick up is that you know, the people are warning kids, don't go into the woods. You know, there's bad stuff happens to people that goes in the woods, and it's not even just like you'll get lost. It's like there's something in there that's dangerous to you. Um, the thing that's dangerous is a giant, basically. This is the boy with
Mhm.
acromegaly.
Yeah.
And this is a hole I filled in. I don't know that necessarily that you talk about this in the hole that I filled in is that sort of the boy with acromegaly is not actually a boy. He's actually pretty old, and he was a long time ago sort of ostracized from the community because of his disfigurement. And he ended up retreating into the woods and just sort of being, he's a wild human basically. So there's a little girl that wanders into the woods, and there's a search that happens for her, and they find her, and she's been taken, and she's been murdered. That's what internment is about, the finding of the body and the burying of the body.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and then that's pretty much all that I've really gathered at this point.
Okay.
Yeah. So after I'm so bad with the track names. After internment, I'm a little confused as to
Hmm.
what's happening after internment. I'm not
Okay.
really so sure.
Yeah, I know why.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
where
I
am
mean
I?
that's
Am I
actually
close? Am I spot
that's
on?
really interesting. Very close. However, so the whole idea, so the Pottsville conglomerate, right? That's like a real thing. It refers to um a type of rock that is mined out of the Pottsville, out of the Schuylkill Mountains.
Hmm.
I think it's the Schuylkill Mountain Range or something in Pennsylvania, but there's a real place called Pottsville, Pennsylvania, that there's like a mountain there, and there's coal miners, and so there's the specific type of rock that they mine out of the earth to like get the coal from is called the Pottsville conglomerate, and
Hmm.
so the whole idea of the story is like it takes place in this town, exactly like you said, sort of like turn of the century, like older kind of, and there's a very, very like puritanical religious sort of feeling to it. And there's a character of this sort of father figure who has like an adoptive daughter, and the father figure is actually the bad guy. He's the one doing all the bad stuff,
Oh.
locking girls in his basement and murdering his wife and stuff, and sort of under the sort of like guise of this kind of hyper religious, like hyper zealous kind of like
Hmm. Hmm.
you need to be pure, you have these like this devil thoughts and kind of thing. So the whole idea of the story is that the boy with acromegaly is exactly like you said. It's a person in the outskirts, kind of like grew up not part of society, sort of shunned, but it is still a boy. And actually, so the idea is
Hmm.
that the girl character um finds the this boy and realizes he's not a monster, and realizes that he's just a regular person with this sort of condition, and then they intend to sort of leave uh forever, sort of like escape this town.
Hmm.
However, the father figure essentially catches her before she can do that, and kind of you know does to her what he's done to other people in the past. And so that's sort of the idea. So that'll
Hmm.
probably make more sense
Yeah.
if you
No.
listen to it again with that
Yeah.
idea, that like all the references to like the father, like your father knows what's best for you and stuff
Mm.
like that,
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
it's meant to be very creepy, and like
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. There's there's
um
um
yeah,
there's
and there's all kinds of motifs and
Yeah, there's
mm,
once I listened to it, I think a couple times through, I was noticing some recurring melodic themes, and um perhaps instruments being used in a sort of uh conscious way, but I'm not really sure necessarily if I've picked up on that quite yet. So can you maybe clear up a little bit of my confusion about the sort of
okay.
last couple of tunes? Because I've listened to just the last, is it 3 or 4 songs? I can't remember the number after internment. Um,
Hmm.
and I find myself at a little bit of a loss. I'm not sure if I've quite picked it out yet.
Okay. um So basically, after internment, it's sort of it's bouncing between the love story of like the girl and the boy, and the kind of like inner turmoil of the father figure. So
Mm.
the father figure, like there's a part of him that like understands the horrible things he's done, and that he has this like tremendous guilt. However, it kind of like jumps between sort of like this horrible guilt and this need to kind of like, sort of purge anything that is like against the very, very, puritanical, very, very fundamentalist kind of
Mm.
ideals that he's gone. So like, track 11 is about the girl and the guy, and track 12 is more about the father figure and what he had done to his wife, the mother of the girl,
Okay.
for believing that she was some sort of, you know what I mean? And so then and track 13 again is more about the like romantic side. Track 14 is more about like kind of the guilt. And then track 15 um, is really kind of like the culmination of like the last moments between the girl and the boy with acromegaly. And then yeah, Chrysopia is sort of the kind of going kind of step by step of like the final thing,
Hmm.
the end of the story.
Hmm.
Basically, it's like, the only thing that's chronologically in place, because everything else is basically jumping around and around. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Great. Thank you
hopefully
for
that
that.
helps.
No, no, definitely.
Yeah,
I'm
of
I'm
course.
so
Yeah.
excited. I listened to it this morning in preparation for this, and I'm gonna listen to it after we finish up here with that in mind, because I like I
Yeah.
said, this, not to kind of do the too fanboy thing, but this is one of my
Mhm.
favorite albums. I think I really,
Well, thank you. Yeah, cool.
it's spectacular in so many ways. I wish that I was better at talking about music, so
Uh-huh.
I could give you a little more specific accolades, but yeah, it's the re-listen value for me is extraordinarily high. I haven't gotten tired of it, not even one
Yeah.
iota yet. Um,
Well, thank you. Yeah, I
what?
appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. What is the ocean beneath the ground?
That's sort of the idea of like the energy source that's from the earth, and it's like a
Mm,
not sustainable. But then I'm trying to draw a parallel between kind of like this 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 kind of source of this black kind of like, dark source of energy that's inside the earth, and sort of parallel that with kind of like a darkness inside people, and like the, sort of evil kind of thoughts or something like these, I don't know how to explain it more eloquently, but you know what I mean? Just sort of like, the urge to do something bad,
mm,
like there's constant references of like, there's like a monster inside
mm,
of us, or there's
mm,
darkness inside of us, and this kind of idea. So just putting those sort of things, it's sort of a metaphor, like the town itself, sort of, a metaphor for the individual person, like synecdoche or whatever it is, like like some small thing representing a larger
mm.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
gotcha.
I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I worked on it for literally for 5 years,
Hmm.
so that's why it's really long, and I may not even remember a lot of the very intricate,
No, sure.
connections and stuff.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, you
yeah,
released it in, was it 2011? Is that right?
2011. Yeah, it's almost 10 years old. That's
Yeah,
wild.
yeah. And you worked on
I
it for
remember
5 years
putting
before
so
that.
much time into it.
You clearly
Yeah.
have. Yeah, you really clearly have. Um, yeah. So okay. So just because I want to get a couple more details out of the way with Pottsville before we move on to something else.
Hmm. Sure. Yeah.
Hymnal and Let Every Evil Lung Fill, which is the track that follows it. Are
Right.
I think so. I've listened to those back to back more than I've listened to the rest of the tunes for sure. The
Hmm.
breakdown
Okay.
in the breakdown in Evil Lung right after the instrumental breakdown is groovy as fuck. And actually, I wish my girlfriend was here because I remember
Yeah.
I actually have it on this notepad. I was trying to figure out the fucking time to it, and I just wrote it down. I just
Wow.
listened to it and I wrote it down and I bookmarked it and I wrote it down.
Yeah.
And when I finally figured out, I was like, "Oh my god, this is so simple!" And I showed my girlfriend, and she was like, "Cool, dude, I guess." But anyway,
Yeah. Great.
it's a ton of fun to just sort of like, I have like a little drum over here, so I just kind of just jam
Yeah.
out to it sometimes. It's a blast. But hymnal, uh, so this is kind of one of those places again where like I think I know what's going on, but now that you've told me kind of your perspective on
Hmm.
it, I'm pretty sure that I'm wrong. So can you
Hmm.
explain, maybe kind of walk me through what's happening with hymnal and then evil lung?
Yeah. So my idea was kind of like, the sort of very puritanical religious sentiments that are established in the father character are kind of echoed by the townspeople of Pottsville. And so to me, hymnal is kind of like this sort of warning from the town to like kind of the children of like, like the same kind of thing that you said, like a sort of warning of this monster that's out there. And they don't realize they're actually talking about the father figure who
Mm,
is the monster, but nobody knows, right? So
mhm,
he's the one actually doing this. Basically, this idea of the boy with acromegaly is getting the blame placed on him for being the one who like captures, you know, young girls and people are disappearing and that kind of thing. And really it's this sort of hyper religious kind of father figure guy. So hymnal is like that. It's just about, and actually, you know what, it's very inspired and almost ripped off from a musical called Parade. I don't
okay.
know if you're into musicals at all, but like when I was in high school, so I grew up in Wisconsin, and I would have gone to a high school that was like amazing in their drama productions, their musicals and stuff, just like national level, just amazing. However, right before high school, I moved to New Jersey, so my friends were in this play,
Mm,
but I was out in Jersey. But I came back to see it, and they had done this show called Parade, and it was just amazing. Like I was so blown away by it, and it has some similar. It's basically the story of, it's a true story actually too, but it's the story of a Jewish New Yorker guy who is living in Georgia in the turn of the century of like 1900, and he runs a factory, and he like a young girl is raped and murdered in like the basement of his factory, and he gets blamed for it. And so the entire story is like just him kind of fighting this battle of like saying he didn't do it. In reality, it ended up being this other character, which is never shown in the play. But basically, the play is about that, and just that entire thing was so much the inspiration for Possible.
mm,
Just this idea of like this very dark theme, this um, and the way they the composer kind of represented things like these religious ideas, and the sort of hymnal kind of sounds, and like having this very folky major um harmonies with like this kind of pedal tone of like something that's totally not in the key.
mm,
You know
mm,
what I mean?
mhm.
So like that was the inspiration. And actually I just remembered now, hymnal specifically, it was inspired by just like I had this job in the summer of 2009 where I worked at the Gallo Winery in California, and I was working in like the grape lab, and I was doing like chemical
Grape
analysis on
lab.
grapes.
Love it.
But yeah, the grape lab, yeah, which sounds fancier than it was. It's really like a garage. Oh, nice cat.
It'd be
It
a
was
good
really
name,
like a
dude.
garage, and we would get all these grape samples in. We would like destem them and smash them into like juice and stuff, and then do like chemical processes on them, or not processes but analyses. Looking at flavors and stuff. And it's I'm on a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't say more than that. However,
Sure.
we were doing these analyses, right? But it was like it's not like wine country. It's not like
Mm,
Napa Valley. No. It was like the desert. It was like
wow.
Modesto, like super hot, over 100 degrees like every day, and we were in this just like garage doing all this processing work. And so after we finished up all the processing before going to do the labs, I would just kind of take a break, and there was the bathroom was actually it was like a separate building, and it was like a public bathroom in a park. You know what I mean? Like it barely had running water. There was no lights,
Just a porta potty
but
with
there was
walls
this
around
just
it.
basically, yeah, but there was this fan, this droning fan,
Oh.
and it just maintained this constant tone, just this. And so I would go in there and I would be sweating. I was a
Uh,
lot heavier. I was like 100 pounds heavier, and I would go in
oh
there and I was
wow.
just like sweating, and I was dying, and I would just be like sitting there, and this thing would be playing, and I would just start like humming to
Uh-huh.
myself, and
Yeah.
and basically the room around me, it it had like a resonant frequency that was a fourth to the fan. And so if I sat there and I sang like ooh, and then like the fan was like ooh, or whatever, I don't know the notes, but
Sure.
it would just emanate so perfectly. And I was like, this is so cool.
That's
And so I just
awesome.
sit there and do that.
Dude,
And that is where the idea for Hymnal came from.
that's really crazy. I had a similar experience. I
It's
didn't end up
drone.
writing an album about it, but no, I'm just kidding. I had actually had a
Hmm.
similar experience.
Yeah.
So when I was in, I went to undergrad for music, and I did a double major in music theory and performance. So it took me 5 years. So I spent 5 years at the school, and it was an old building. It's like a
Yeah.
dungeon. I miss it so much. It's like a freaking dungeon. It just felt like there was
Hmm.
history in the walls. I mean, it was they built the music school in like the 50s or something. Um,
Uh-huh.
and the bathroom in the basement, which is where all the practice rooms were, had this fan that was at slightly sharp than an F. I figured out, and
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I'd go in there to do the thing. You use bathroom, and
Hmm.
I would end up whistling to it, and I would find myself going. I've sat here with my dick out in front of a urinal for like I don't know how long, just whistling to this fucking fan. I need to go do something
Yeah.
else. But I still like I still looked forward to it, and I never thought about kind of thinking about the resonant frequency, but it was all tile, and it was a decently big bathroom. And so yeah, it just resonated, and there's nothing like whistling and having it just sort of reverb like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Yeah, I had good. It's weird to
Yeah.
say this, but I had good memories whistling in that bathroom.
No, I totally understand. I mean, it was great. I mean, my little outhouse shed thing, because like you'd kind of start on like a couple higher notes and you'd sort of play around with the scale and you'd make these harmonies.
Mm,
And it was funny because the resonant frequency was like one of the lowest notes that I could sing loudly.
mm,
And so it was like this really
cool,
bassy tone. And so like
cool.
I would kind of start up and then finally would hit the bass and just everything would like glow. And it was like, this is
That's
great,
awesome. Yeah, yeah. No,
So
that's
I
great.
should. In hindsight, I didn't have like a smartphone at the time. This was
Hmm.
2009, right?
Sure, yeah.
But if it were today, I would have made like a video or an audio like memo or something to capture the way it sounded. But
Yeah,
that's why I write a song. So
yeah.
that's why I don't write songs anymore. I just take videos. Notes.
If you ever make it back out to Denver, there's a place not too far from here called the Tank, and it's this
Hmm.
I think it's underground. I may be wrong about that, but it was some kind of like grain silo that obviously is no longer used as a grain silo, but it's gigantic, and it has like a second and a half like delay to it. And they have a recording studio built in
Oh
there,
yeah. Okay.
and so you can go and record. There's actually someone wrote a piece for the Tank, so it's not underground because it can't be. But somebody wrote a piece for the Tank where he had different musicians placed around this giant silo with mallets playing certain parts, because you get the metal's different places and things like that, and you get different sounds. And
Hmm.
that's a really trippy recording if you
Yeah.
ever get a chance to listen to that. But that Tank it would be really cool to
Yeah.
do some acapella recording in, for sure, because you just have a monstrous reverb. It's
Yeah.
absolutely
That would
incredible.
be, yeah, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Heck yeah.
this has been like 2015. I went on a road trip to California, and on my way back, I drove through Arizona, where a friend of mine lives. Shout out to Savannah Whitman. She's not listening, but shout out to Savannah Whitman. And
Nice.
she's a photographer, and I was like, I'm coming through, and she was like, let me take some pictures of you. So I was like, sure. Where do you want to go? Thinking she'd be like, let's go to like downtown Tucson or something like that. And no, she
Yeah.
was. God damn it. The last thing I need is a cat walking across my computer and just ending everything. Um, but
Yeah.
so she takes me out to the middle. Like, we drove for like an hour into the freaking desert, and there are just these domes kind of chilling just right off the road.
Mhm.
And apparently they were built in like the 70s, I think 70s or 80s. Somebody was intending to build a factory that manufactured computer chips, like motherboards and things like that. And apparently, what was really one of the building methods that was really popular at the
Mhm.
time was you would take these gigantic balloons, like 2 stories tall, and you would fill them up, and then you would cover them with plaster and concrete. And when it hardened, you deflate the balloon, you get this giant dome. So there's three of these
Uh,
structures. One of them is like three domes kind of mushed together. Another is two, and then one is this weird, like almost UFO shape. And they're completely abandoned. I mean, there's holes in the ceilings, and there's graffiti all over the outside and inside. I've got some cool pictures from that. It was really fun. Um,
yeah.
but one of the things that I discovered in the 3 dome one is the ceiling. You get this kind of idea of a dome, and then it kind of comes down, and then it goes back up to the second dome and comes down. And depending on where you stood underneath this dome, you got a different kind of a reverb. So if you were standing right under the tallest part, you got this really long, slow delay kind of reverb thing. Whereas if you stood right under where the sort of 2 domes meet, you got almost like a slap back, like a pop, 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 pop. And I had my cello with me, and so I just kind of moved. I found like a stack of fucking pallets. So I was just moving this stack of pallets around so I could sit on it and like just playing like Bach underneath a slap back reverb. You know, it's like when I've never gotten to do that before. And it was fun to kind of play with that physical space in the sound. And then the UFO one was weird because instead of being like a round dome, it kind of went round and then it kind of sharply turned this way. And there was, I remember being, I don't remember exactly where under this thing that I was, but I remember finding a place where not only did I get this longer delay from the roof, I got the slap back from the side where it kind of did this thing. So I had like a double reverb thing going on, but no amps, no equipment. It was just the actual space.
Yeah.
And
that would be awesome to take a choir in there or something.
I thought the exact same thing, like a really good choir and just have them in there doing, you know, even just singing through, you know, pretty standard chords would be incredible. And it's interesting because like it kind of makes me understand like why, you know, places like churches, Catholic churches, are these sort of vaulted ceilings, and there's these sort of they're super echoey and super reverby. And in a modern church, we have like I have a recurring church gig at a Catholic church. The priest has a microphone. I have a microphone in front of me. The pianist has, like, everything is amplified, and there's a sound system. But there seems to, you know, still be this need to kind of have this sort of physical space that can kind of project and even like distort sound in some ways. And the experience with
eminence.
And like the experience with like playing within those sounds. Like I'm a huge Bach nerd because obviously I play the cello. I love Bach. And it's interesting when you kind of go back to his music and you think about the fact that like he spent his entire life in churches, in places with giant amounts of reverb and echo, that weren't these kind of flat, kind of sterile sounds ever. You know, it's like every musical sound that he heard pretty much was kind of influenced in some way by the space. And he was writing always in churches and cathedrals and stuff. And so like going back to his compositions and kind of trying to look at them also with the idea of where he was writing them in mind, it changes the way that you listen to it. Like, just in the same way that like knowing the story about Pottsville kind of changes the way that I've listened to it. Like you telling me this story about the bathroom, that's going to change how I listen to hymnal. Like that's really, it's going to change the way of, you know, my experience with that. So now I'm going to be thinking about it. Pete was going to the bathroom when he wrote this. No, I'm just kidding. Ruined it for me.
Yeah. No, that's okay. You know what? I was so dehydrated by then. You know, I was sweating my ass off. I was just in there cooling down. You know what I mean? I was embarrassed. I was sweating so much more than everybody else. So I would go in there and just take paper towels and dry myself off and just sit there and cool down. You know what I mean?
It happens when you're in the grape lab. You know, everyone knows you get sweaty in the grape lab.
That's by it. The way, the grape lab, like 105 degrees.
By the way, I a couple of years ago, I started keeping a note in my phone with just potential band names. I'm definitely adding Grape Lab to the band name list for sure.
Nice.
It's on there.
Yeah. What's the best one you have in there?
Pete, that depends entirely on who you ask.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And it would depend on the genre of music.
Yeah. And like it's funny because like there are certain names that kind of, it's like obvious to me this would be a punk band, and my friends are like, that sounds like it could be like a metal band, and I'm like, you getting that from that name? Really? Okay, sure. I don't see it, but I can tell you what the worst one is.
Okay.
Feminism.
Just
the worst one.
Just in all caps, though. Yeah. In all caps, I think would be
every
good.
time I scroll through and see it, I'm just like, why, dude? Why did you put that?
You know what would make it good, though? You know what would make it good is if you removed all the vowels.
Feminism.
Yeah. If it was just, you know, FMNSM.
Yeah. All caps. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
You know what
that could be a hardcore band, as long as it was like actually promoting the idea of, you know what I mean? Like if it was actually like kind of, you know, It could be
Yeah.
like a nice, like angry, like anti, like toxic masculinity kind of thing. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah.
Like
It'd
a
be. It
nice
would. It would
power
be. It would.
violence band or something.
In my mind, it's an all-girl punk band from like the early
Yeah,
'90s. That's
that would be
and
sick.
they all do
I mean,
roller derby. That's
I kind of
the
want to listen to that now.
that's
Yeah,
I know,
I kind of
right?
want to write that album.
Oh
Yeah,
man. You know what you want to know what the name After Feminism is?
yeah.
Feminism is not a good band name. I literally wrote that in the list. Listen, Pete,
So that's
I
like the next
usually
name.
I usually think about the list only when I'm trashed. So most of these
Yeah.
are placed in there on very poor judgment. Um,
Okay.
so but they're still fun to look through, and it's a good. Oh, the banana situation is one of my favorite.
That's a very good, like, either a ska band
Yes,
or like a really weird jazz like thing.
it's always been a ska band in my
I
mind
would say,
for sure. Yeah,
yeah,
it's always been a ska
ska
band.
makes perfect
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
god. So speaking about you know weird band names and music, why Invalids?
um, yeah. So actually, the name came from first. I had written a song that was, I never really intended for a real band, but it was basically a song that I had written in Tabit, the program that I use. And so basically, the 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 name came from back when I was in like maybe seventh or eighth grade. I don't know why, but like we had some sort of class trip to go see a play,
Hmm.
and the play was called. Oh, it was for my French class, and the play was called Les Invalides, which the invalids in French. And basically, it was like it was the thing about the play was like the people would act out a scene in French, and then they would sort of pantomime them reversing the scene really quickly, and then they would act out the same thing in English.
Oh, huh.
Uh, and like it was okay, like it didn't like have a profound like impact on me, but for some reason I loved the name. The name of it I thought was great, like Les Invalides, like just there were people like dealing with relationship problems, and they were the invalids,
Hmm.
and so like I just loved the sound of the word, and basically I started to like when I started to write the music for Invalids, it's really predicated on like very, very complex music, very difficult parts to play, and
Hmm.
like it's increasing difficulty the longer I do it. Like it's a personal challenge, but the idea is like it's sort of like this juxtaposition of like the name of the band is sort of somebody with the inability to do something, but then the music requires such ability.
Hmm.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So
no,
it's
that's
sort of
great.
like to me it's a positive thing. It's supposed to represent like that you can achieve anything. It doesn't matter how handicapped you might be. Like it's possible to do. So
Yeah.
like to me, I've never questioned. Like it's always a very it's a very positive, very like
Hmm.
reinforcing kind of what do you call it? Like motivational
Hmm.
sort of
Hmm.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, though I believe in the UK, like it's not a very friendly word.
Mm,
uh,
yeah. Yeah.
so you know what I mean. It's
Yeah.
and so I don't know. I mean, there are fans of ours over there. So
Hmm.
I guess they kind of get it. But like uh, in hindsight, I would probably choose something a little less, cathartic. I
It's a
guess a
little
little less,
late. It's a little late, I think.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
what am I gonna do? Yeah, yeah.
Oh
There's
man.
also a punk band from like the '90s called The Invalids.
Oh.
Um, they made an album in like '91 or '92 or something like that. But you know, my band is just Invalids. There's
Invalids,
no
right.
article. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
um you guys did a collaboration project with a band called I think they're pronounced Anova. Um which
Yeah.
I listened to a couple of their tracks, but I haven't gotten super into their music, but
Hmm.
it's super chip tune, like electronic, kind of pulsy,
Yeah.
beady. But it does have a mathy kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
Like it seems like at least the couple tracks I listened to, it time wise, it's pretty straightforward. hashtag free44, I guess. Is that one of your hashtags? Free four
Defend
four.
4-4, yeah.
Defend 44. Yeah, I love it. I
Defend
love
4-4,
it.
yeah.
Love it. So it's such a cool project because their sound is so different from yours because they're using it. It seems primarily electronic instruments, whereas Invalids is,
Yeah.
you know, you're using analog instruments. Um, and you know, they've got a cover of one of your tunes and you've got a cover of one of their tunes, which is so
Hmm.
cool. It's so great to see that sort of like listening to like their tune and then listening to your cover and kind of seeing that yeah, it's just really cool hearing it in such a different medium. How did you work on that with those guys? Like, did they just say, "Here's the tune, learn it, figure it out, and then record it, and we're good"? Like,
No, yeah. So actually, Anova is just one guy, and
mm,
I met him through the web forums of Tabit, of the program that I use. So for many, many years,
wow,
I posted on this forum for this program, right? And I met this guy. His name is Daniel Davis. He's just such a good musician. This really, really good, like, sense of like melody and chords and everything. And so we've been friends for a very, very long time.
cool.
And basically he started doing the Innova stuff. And essentially Innova is or was made entirely using a Game Boy. Like, and so like based on the limitations of the Game Boy. And he literally, it was on a Game Boy. There was a cartridge that ran a software, and he would go in and enter it with the D-pad and the A B buttons. Like what note
That's
happens
wild.
where, right? Yeah, it's super crazy. And so and the funny thing about Anova is that, or the funny thing about the Game Boy, I should say, is that only four sounds can happen at one time.
Mm,
So like if you listen to it and you really try to focus, like only four things at any given time can be happening. So that's why there's lots of arpeggios, there's lots of like, flickering
um,
back and forth,
mm-hmm,
because you could make them short and give like the illusion that two things are happening at the same time, but they're not. It's only
okay.
four things at one singular time. So, and that includes drums, it includes bass, it includes
Everything.
melodies, right?
Wow.
So basically how it works is there's like a noise track that represents the drums. There's two melody tracks, and then there's kind of like a bass track. And the bass has like an emphasis when it first hits that sounds like a kick drum. And so like using those four things, he
Mm,
makes like a big sound of music. So basically, I
that's
love his
cool.
stuff, and he had released it. He had released an album or two at the time of we did the Permutation EP, and just for a long time, I would say like we should do some sort of collab thing. And then I was thinking like, okay, well, Invalids is all about having as many notes as possible, right? We have six strings on the guitar. We play with our
Right.
fingers, like it's just a barrage of notes. And Anova is about like expressing the most possible with four things. You know what I mean?
Mm,
So it's like such a limitation on the amount of sounds that can happen, and representing big music with that. And ours is the opposite. It's
right.
using just this huge amount of
Uh-huh.
notes to represent a really tight, musical thing. So I
Yeah.
said, okay, let's flip them, so like we can both write songs for each other and cover. So we literally wrote the songs that we did with the intention for the other to cover them. Like they were written for that album. And so, I remember working on mine and just thinking like, I don't know how he's going to do this, like, because I'm like, there's so many notes going on. There's like melody
Wow.
on top of it. Like there's so much stuff. And then his track was amazing. So that's still one of my favorite songs to listen to. And still, I say to this day, the hardest song I have ever tried to record was our cover
Mm,
of his song.
yeah.
It took me so many tries. I couldn't
Really.
get it right.
Wow. What? Yeah. So,
But
what was the
finally
process
we
like
got
for
it.
learning that? Like, did you slow it down? Did you just try to learn it at speed?
So I believe I got the stems from him. So
Ah,
everything is four channels, and so I got each individual channel,
right.
and I just did it by ear.
Okay.
For him, I think I gave, because he was a Tablet user as well, so I gave him the tab of what it was, which I think he used to sort of distill it down into the Game Boy Logic. But yeah, you know, uh, I mostly did it by ear. I don't think he gave me any like actual written thing, but I had the
Mm,
stems sort of isolated from each other, so I could hear exactly what was going on. And it's very clean because it's
yeah.
synth. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
Yeah.
every note is super
Hmm.
crisp. You can hear exactly what it is.
I would never have guessed that that was a freaking Game Boy, ever. It's incredible. So
Yeah, it's
so
literally game. I mean, he
is he
literally has
playing?
a Game Boy and
Is
it's
he
a
playing the
headphone jack
tracks?
out, and he records
Is he playing the tracks live? Like when he records this, is he like playing the Game Boy like an instrument live? Like it's not just
Yeah,
a program.
yeah, yeah. So the real heartbreaker of it is he no longer does this.
Mm.
But in his heyday, when Anova was a live thing, he would literally have the Game Boy and it would run out of the headphone jack through a mixer, through speakers, and then he would stand there with a guitar and he would do like tapping lines over it. So he would kind of echo some of the synth parts with a guitar, and it was such a cool show. It was
That's
like it was
amazing.
amazing. So we played a couple shows with him. Yeah, it's so good. He
That's
now does kind of
incredible.
electronic music, and he's
Uh-huh.
still really good at it. Yeah, he's like my primary source. If I, like I'm like hey, like how do I make trap music? I could text him and he'll be like, okay, well you need like these sound pads, you need like this kind of rhythm.
I
So
should
yeah,
hook you
he's
up with
great.
my
Daniel Davis,
buddy.
he's
I
really good
should
at
hook you up with my buddy Chris Hewitt. Shout out to Chris Hewitt. Please come on my podcast
that.
already.
Nice.
Damn it. Who is kind of your doppelganger. You guys resemble each other in a less
Nice,
than
yeah.
insignificant
Similar
way.
haircut, maybe. Okay.
It's more the beard maybe. I don't know, whatever.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
that man is yeah, that guy that guy that guy has some weird. He's into some weird shit, which is great. He's introduced me to some weird shit that
Yes. Yeah.
it's not what I like to listen to, but sometimes it's nice. It's
Hmm.
like a bit of a it's like eating a big chunk of wasabi. It's not that pleasant,
Uh-huh.
but at the end of it, it just clears everything out. And
Yeah.
yeah, he's turned me on to some weird nonsense. But the yeah, this whole Game Boy thing is kind of blowing my mind a little bit because I just remember playing Pokemon on the Game Boy and never thinking about making music with it. Like that's a jump that
Hmm.
I can't even
Yeah.
imagine. Like not only having the idea in the first place, but actually figuring out how to do it is that's mind blowing. It's absolutely incredible. I, yeah,
Yeah.
like
When you actually have
oh
to
man,
buy a cartridge of the software, of the music software, it's actually printed on a physical cartridge like a game. And you put it into the Game Boy and you literally compose the music inside the thing. It's super gnarly. Like he showed me how he does it. Like I couldn't imagine sitting there like doing it.
just
You know
time
what I mean?
consuming
He,
or
it's just, yeah. I mean, yeah. And just the learning curve and,
yeah,
because
wow.
it's set up very data driven. It
Mm.
looks like a spreadsheet, and so you say like, okay, like this channel plays this note at this time, and then like, you just have like hundreds of these data points, and then the software just reads it like one after the other. It's wild. I don't know. Like,
Yeah, that's insane. So so
yeah,
the you said he still makes music, right? But just not with the Game Boy.
yes,
Is it
yeah,
still
yeah.
under a Nova?
No, so he started going under, I believe it's called Side Eye,
Side eye.
Side Eye Music, something like that. But his name is Daniel Davis, so he's relatively easy to find based on that because he's produced a lot of stuff, but under various names. But yeah, he did a couple albums with a Game Boy and also one using an old Amiga computer. That's actually really cool. It's sort of like this like kind of up tempo dance music, but it's a really cool album.
Yeah.
Called Double Density. Yeah, but everything he's made is really good. So he's a very good composer, but doesn't produce enough music. Maybe because I don't know if it's a lack of confidence in his own stuff, but I absolutely love what he does. So
Yeah. Sweet, dude. Yeah, I definitely
yeah,
Anova is on my agenda to listen to a little more in depth, but yeah, I'd
yeah,
love to listen to this other guy. Or not this other guy, but his other projects. Um
yeah.
so
Hey, wait.
sure.
Hold on. So, do you mind if we do a quick intermission?
Yo, yeah, yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go make myself another one of these, and I'll be
That
back in
sounds
like 5 minutes.
that sounds great. So we're gonna take a little
Okay.
break, and I got the intermission slide up, and we are muted. Bye.
Japanese, like the J-pop group.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm just a really huge perfume fan, and so is my roommate. And so he printed out like a bunch of printed out like a giant poster at work, but it's like a raster baited thing, so it's like separate files. And then you tape it all together and make like this enormous poster.
Right. I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
We are back live, by the way.
big time perfume fan.
I love it. Yeah, we're right back live, by the way.
Yeah, nice,
So
nice.
earlier I had told you that sort of the way that I discovered you and then Invalids was when the tallest tree collapsed. That video, and that video is a part of or was a part of a bit of a really interesting series where you were writing like 1 minute songs to post on Instagram.
Right.
Hapax Legomena, I think was what you called it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Right. Yeah. Hapax Legomena. Yeah.
I actually can't find that anywhere. So did it just get released under the name? Because you do have what's called the 200-second EP, but it doesn't seem like any of the videos that you posted that have this tag seem to be in that album. I think the timeline doesn't match up either.
The problem, the problem is I never finished it. So I wholly intend, my intention is to make 12 songs for Hapax Legomena. And the idea was that I would get 12 songs, and it's still going, that I would write 12 songs in this style. The idea, every one is exactly 1 minute long. And then I would I would make a new Instagram account and then just share each video in order, like a track. And then like the art of the video, like if you looked at the whole Instagram page, like kind of every image, you know what I mean? Like, like scrolling through, it would then, everything would connect, and it would just be these 12 images that all form one larger image.
Like,
and each one would be a video. And so as you click on each one, you know, it would be a song.
That's awesome.
And I still intend to do it. However, the problem is I moved out of my house. So I used to have a house, but I no longer live in the house. And so now I live in an apartment, and I can't record loud stuff here. So basically, once I have a situation where I can record stuff again, I intend to continue work on that, to finally finish it and write the rest. So I believe I have 6 tracks written so far. Only 5 have been released, because one of them is still missing a single part. It's a violin part, and I cannot play the violin. So my hands are my fingers don't fit next to each other.
Yeah.
Like I can't do it.
I completely feel you. So I actually have discovered if you record on the cello and just pitch shift it up an octave, it can be pretty convincing as far as the violin sound.
Oh, that's actually a good idea. You know what I could do is I could record it in like a comfortable register, pitch shift it, and then do a video of where I'm playing it up here, and it'll just be a lie.
No one would know.
But like, who would know?
I mean, to be fair, Pete, I would probably know, but yeah,
cellists would know. But I'm not a cellist. Yeah, so.
But I also don't really give a shit, to be fair.
Yeah, perfect.
You know, I'm classically trained, but at the end of the day, like I care more about the sound. I don't necessarily care as much about how you get that sound. As long as you're not like hurting yourself to do it, obviously. Like, you know, like I've worked with students before who like have tools. I've worked with students before who have pretty good sound, but the way that they're getting it is not sustainable. You know, like high shoulders, they're kind of pressing in, and it's like, okay, you've learned to work around this, but fast forward 5 years, you're gonna have back problems, and I know that because it happened to me, because I had a habit of jacking my shoulder up. I ended up with it was really crazy back problems and tendonitis so bad I could barely close my hand into a fist.
Yikes! Yeah,
and
that's no good.
I was super scared. Well, I thought I had like this happened when I was like 19 or 20. I thought I was getting like juvenile like rheumatoid arthritis or something, and I ended up working with a really great sports therapist who showed me that, like, dude, the reason is because you're pulling your shoulder up, and he was like, I see this in athletes all the time, like people who throw footballs and they pull their shoulder up when they throw, and it's fine, you can do it
Yeah.
over and over and over, but do it every day, 100 throws a day for 5 years, and you end up not being able to close your hand. But yeah, I mean, so it's like if you got that sound, but you got it by playing in a lower position on the cello and pitch shifting it up, I honestly don't give a shit. As long as it sounds
Yeah.
good. If it sounded bad, if it didn't seem like it fit, then I'd
Right.
be like, it doesn't really fit.
Yeah.
But I'm not the kind of
Cool
person to be
stuff.
like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to watch your video, Pete, because you're not playing in position. I don't give a shit. That doesn't really
Yeah.
matter to me that much.
There's enough people that do that downvotes and everything, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Cello is
uh,
cello is one of those things where I wish I like had a professional show me how to play it. You know what I mean? Like I have other instruments that I've just picked up and I play just because they're similar enough to a guitar
mhm.
that I can figure it out, like a mandolin, a banjo, a ukulele, whatever. But like a cello is it's one of my favorite instruments. Like I absolutely love the sound of the cello, and
You're made of taste,
that's why I
Pete.
picked it up. But you know, but like it just the technique to play it is so specific for
Yeah.
these stringed instruments that it's so difficult. So I very very much admire somebody who can do this well. So
Yeah. I mean,
cheers.
like, listen, man, I teach cello for a living. Like, if you ever want to just hang out and play some cello, I'm super down. Obviously, I wish we were in the same
Yeah,
city. We could do it in
I'm
person, but
actually very bad.
you're
Yeah.
not, though. Actually, you're not. You're not. You're really not.
Okay. Okay.
For some,
I may have a bad cello.
you do
It's
actually.
low quality.
You
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
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 No, I
Um,
know that. It's cheap. My girlfriend got it for me in high school. Like it was a great gift. I still love it.
the
But yeah,
unfortunate
it's not
thing,
like a
the unfortunate thing about cello is, if you've got $150 burning a hole in your pocket, you can find a decent guitar. Um, if you want a decent cello, you're going to spend like 1,500 at least. I mean, I anything under 1,500 is going to be pretty much garbage in my experience.
yeah.
And that's a really unfortunate barrier. It's a really unfortunate sticking point. Guitar has the benefit of being such a popular instrument that so many people make them, and so the supply is super high. And in some ways, it is a simpler construction versus the cello. But there's also been at this point
Yeah.
100 years of research into how to build these things better and cheaper and cheaper. I mean, like, if you ever picked up a Yamaha acoustic guitar, they are stunningly good for the price point. I mean, it's really stupid. I mean, what you can get for $180 for a Yamaha is actually really quite nice. But I think, unfortunately, especially in America, it's just like
Yeah.
the popularity of like violin and cello versus guitar is so much lower, that there's a much lower supply, and there's a lot of people out there, I think his name is Paul Krentz, this guy who's is it Paul Krentz? I want to look this up now. There's a lot of people out there who are doing a ton of incredible research on these instruments. If you it's may be hard to tell with the light, but if you see on my cello, there's this little black dot
Hmm.
down there.
Yeah. Okay. I see it. Yeah. 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 On the
Yeah,
bottom left. I mean, from
yeah,
my perspective, but
yeah,
yeah, under the F hole. Yeah.
yeah. My video is mirrored because it gives me anxiety to see myself IRL.
Hmm.
Um,
Makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so that is that's what's called the Krentz modulator, and basically what that is inside the cello. I'm happy to show you to it, show it to you at some point. But inside the cello is this like really big tube. It's vacuum sealed, and there's a magnet inside of it, and that black bit on the outside is also a magnet. And it basically, depending on, and so you put the big magnet inside and the little magnet on the outside, you can move it around. And depending on where you put it, it kind of drastically alters the actual tone of the cello. And it's mostly used to get rid of what's called a wolf tone, but it actually has a
Yeah.
huge
Okay.
impact in the actual tone. And this guy,
So it's just like a dampener.
yeah, kind of. I'll show it to you real quick.
Okay.
It's a brilliant thing. It's really crazy.
Hmm.
So this little guy is what goes on the outside. So it's a little magnet with a little bit of felt. and then this is what's on the inside.
Yeah.
And it's got, so it's a vacuum sealed tube,
Okay.
and that is another bigger magnet. It's the same, video sucks. The same thing. Basically, what happens
Yeah.
is, allegedly, I mean, it actually does work. So I have a really bad wolf tone on my cello, and I've been dealing with it for a very long time, and it's in a very inconvenient place. I've tried the every version of a little string pincher that you can come up with. I've had like luthiers do shit with my sound post and with my bridge placement, and it just moves it. It doesn't really get rid of it. This is the only thing that's actually gotten rid of it. It was expensive, but
Yeah.
since this is my job, it's business expense, so I get to deduct it. But basically, what happens is this guy
Very nice.
floats with the magnet when you hit a certain frequency. But because it pinches, I mean, it's actually like if you put it around your finger, it's tighter than you would think. It's not
Okay.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it's
It's
not.
a nice strong neodymium magnet.
Yeah, neodymium is the word. That's right.
Yeah.
And so basically it pinches the top at a certain point, and so not only can you affect the wolf tone, you can affect the actual tonal qualities of the instrument. So I've been finding out if I put it closer to like the bottom, like right there, like closer to the edge of it, it kind of dampens, like not dampens, but it kind of like clarifies the low end of the cello, so it's a little brighter, like this, like the low C string. Whereas if I move it closer to like like the tailpiece, maybe a little up closer to like here, it kind of softens the high end, the middle end. So this guy also has a machine that he claims will break an instrument in. It will achieve seven years of playing 1 hour a day in 2 weeks. And
Okay.
basically I've never been able to find a picture. I think he's super secretive about it, but you give him your instrument, your brand new cello or violin, and he hooks it up to this machine that supposedly vibrates every pitch possible on the cello constantly, and he just lets it sit there for 2 weeks.
Okay.
And so, in the sense of like guitars have the benefit of like 100 years of like all this money being put into research, we're getting some of that now with geniuses like this motherfucker Krentz. Is it Paul Krentz? I don't remember at this point.
Heck yeah.
But
Some Krentz. Some kind of Krentz.
some kind of Krentz. It's a fun name, Krentz. But yeah, it's crazy. There's he's got these like different end pins and like fingerboard materials. You're right in pointing out that there's like a lot more nuance than you might expect in terms of that thing. Yeah. And I don't want to do that thing where it's like my instrument's super hard, but it is.
No,
it's harder
it's
than
100% true. It's very easy to make a sound you don't intend.
Yes.
On a stringed instrument, and that's my biggest problem. It might be like a harmonic of the note you intend, but even still, like if it's not what you're trying, but like I'm getting all kinds of weird squeaks and stuff, and like I even for the Hapax Legama stuff, like the 1 minute songs, like I had to practice those parts, and those parts, it's not even the whole song, it's like 30 seconds, right? I had to practice those so many times to get the sound I wanted, because like I didn't have the dexterity,
Saying I'm gonna sit in my computer chair at watching. So when you're talking about like the harmonic thing, do you mean something like like that kind of sound?
And especially like my biggest problem is moving between two notes. I always get like some squeak or some like like some yucky note that doesn't belong, you know what I mean, just because like I haven't synced up my hands.
You mean two strings? Or
yeah, I mean I do that. Sometimes I'll do two strings accidentally, you know what I mean, or whatever, but basically I'm just bad at the cello.
Well, hey, I'm bad at the guitar. I'm bad at the guitar. I can play Wonderwall, and that's about the limit that I've achieved.
Yeah. It's all how much practice, you know what I mean? It's how much time have you put into it. That's the only factor. And I haven't played the cello as much as I should have. I
disagree with that.
Okay.
No, not entirely. It's not about the amount of time. We were talking before we actually started the stream about sort of this idea of like habits. You can practice wrong for a really long time and never improve.
Yeah, you're right.
It's got to do with what you're doing and and how much time you're spending doing it. Like if you do one really good exercise really well only once, you will learn nothing. So it does have, it's like time is a factor. So I shouldn't say I entirely disagree with you, but it does have to do with
Yeah.
how you're practicing and how you're approaching, like, especially when it comes to technique. Like when you identify what I want to happen, I'm not achieving that, so I got to practice so that I can achieve this thing. It's just as much about how you do that than as much time as you do it. And I'm a big fan of trying to make practice time as efficient as possible. I want to spend as little time as I can practicing and as much time as I can playing. So like a hypothetical would be like, if I have 3 hours today to play cello, I would much rather spend an hour and a half doing really intense practice, like technical stuff, and the other hour and a half actually playing. You know, whether it's improvising or working on a piece or whatever,
Yeah.
but actually enjoying the instrument. But it's entirely possible that like you could have a really inefficient way to address these things, and you could not even get done in 3 hours what you could get done in one. At some point, I would be super happy to sit down with
Yeah,
you
totally.
and talk through some stuff. I can give you some exercises that I think someone like you'd be able to get them pretty quickly. You know, you're not starting from scratch as
Yeah.
far as music in
Honestly,
your
I think it would be a good
ear.
idea. No.
What?
Yeah, it would be a good idea because I do have
Oh,
my cello in my apartment. So I could play it, and as long as I play it well, I won't feel embarrassed about how much noise I'm making. You know what I mean? Like if my neighbors hear like a nice cello, like that's okay. You
so
know what I mean? Even if they hear like squeaks and
so it's funny because like you know you were saying you used to live in a house, now you live in an apartment. I actually have the opposite
yeah.
situation. I just moved into this house.
Mhm.
And you know, if you lived in Denver, like I would offer, you know, you could come into my studio at any time that you wanted, obviously.
Yeah.
But I actually lived in an apartment 1 block away from the Lamont School of Music in Denver, which is where I did my master's degree. And this apartment this one street just south on York Street, south of the building. A lot of music majors end up living in those apartments on those streets because it's 1 block away from the school. Now I moved into this apartment on this block after I graduated, ironically. But I had like for 2 years I had a bassoonist and a bass clarinetist who lived below me, and then right before I moved out, a violinist moved in, and you know there was this sort of understood thing of like no one will play after 8 kind of deal. But other than that, it's like free reign. And I have lived in places before where like, you know, I've gone and talked to my neighbors and been like, hey man, I play the cello. I'm going to practice in my apartment. You know, are there certain times when like it's cool with you, or like are there times when it's not? And I've never had someone
Yeah.
be like, the fuck are you talking about? Fuck off, dude. You know, everyone's been like, well, sure,
Yeah.
I go to where I come back from work at 6. It'd be nice if you didn't play after 7 or something, you know. You can also get you can get one of these guys, which is a practice mute. I don't know if you've ever seen these.
Hmm.
You can get
I
this for
have
like,
something like that. Yeah.
is it like one of the
It's
rubber
like
ones?
it's like a
Yeah.
rubbery thing, yeah.
Yeah. The rubber ones are good. They tend to preserve the sort of general quality of the cello more, but the metal ones tend to cut the sound um a lot more dramatically than the rubber ones. So you can always try that. I mean, I think this
Okay.
thing was like
Yeah.
$15 probably. It's a good paperweight too.
Yeah. Honestly, I appreciate that you said that you can't, or at least you're hard pressed to get a good sound out of a cello if it's less than $1,500, because it makes me feel less self-conscious about my my technique, and more that like I'm playing a $300 cello. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you know, here's
It kind of
like
makes me want to save up and like just get like a really.
I lost you. I lost you right after you said you wanted to save up. How about that?
Oh, I'm just saying, like it would be nice to. It kind of makes me want to save up and just buy a nice one and then devote some time to playing it well.
Have
You know what I mean?
have you looked into renting something?
No, it never crossed my mind.
Yeah, so there what where do you live now, if you don't mind me asking?
New Jersey.
Okay, so
Yeah, central New Jersey.
it's a bigger city. Yeah, you should be able to find
Yeah.
plenty of places that'll rent cellos. In Denver, the going rate for like a decent cello plus the case plus the bow plus like insurance, is like between 60 and $90 a month. If you've got that much to
Hmm.
spare, and like the it's different shop by shop and store by store, but
Yeah.
the standard outfit is like, it's a rent to own kind of situation. So you're actually making payments towards owning the thing, and a lot of times they'll give you a discount if you buy it outright. um, I work at a
Mm.
I teach for a school in Lakewood, Colorado, called Golden Music, and they have really really nice cellos, like student model cellos. Their introductory cellos are actually really really nice. I would say
Hmm.
that they're not far away from my instrument, which is not that much money. I think that thing's worth like $4,000. Um, and for, it's like I think it's $80 a month for them, and that's including like insurance. So like, you have to pay for your own strings and stuff like that, but if you just need to set up, if your bridge is
Yeah.
wonky, that'll cover it. Obviously it's different store by store, but that would be something to look into. And you could always, try to sell that thing, the one you've got, on eBay or something, and get a couple $100 for it and use it to put down on a rental, if you can spare the money a month.
Yeah.
I know that 60 to $100 is
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of a
Yeah.
lot, but for someone like you, I mean, it's like it might be worth it. And
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it would be cool to get more. Like, I love the sound of it, and I've always been like, I've always had this feeling that I can never get to the point where I can make it sound as beautiful as I want it to. You know what I mean? Just because, and I'm hoping it's because like the quality of my instrument is just not very good.
I
You know what
think
I mean? So
I
that
think
like,
it's I think
I
it's
could never reach
completely
it.
I think it's completely legitimate to bring the quality into question, because like, dude, I've been
Yeah.
doing this for 18 years. Like, this is all I've been doing
Hmm.
for 18 years, is like playing cello. Like,
Hmm.
it's my job. I perform for a living. I teach for a living. I went to school for it. I got a master's degree in it. This is all I've been doing for most of my life at this point. Um,
Yeah.
I've played some like eBay cellos, like $100 cellos, and I can get a passable sound out of it, but that's not the same as somebody who, I mean, it's different. It's a different story. Well, it's like guitars. You've been playing guitar for a really long time. I picked up a guitar when I was like
Right.
14, but I've never really like spent a lot of time being serious about it. So it's like,
Yeah.
there's also that kind of, how does that saying go? It's a poor craftsman blames his tools. Um,
Hmm.
that's super bullshit.
Right. Yeah. That's
That's
what I was afraid of.
completely bullshit.
I was afraid of.
So bullshit. No. Well, because think about it like this.
Yeah.
Take like Yo-Yo Ma. Everyone knows Yo-Yo Ma. Amazing cellist, right?
Yeah.
Iconic. Like,
Yeah.
if you gave him a banjo, do you really think that he could play it just as good as the cello? I don't think so. He'd probably be better than most people
Yeah.
who picked up a banjo for the first time, but
Maybe a mandolin. Yeah.
maybe a mandolin, yeah, because it's a similar tuning.
A mandolin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
Um,
same tuning. Yeah.
but so my dad's a woodworker. He actually made this cello stand that my cello's on. And I remember talking to him at one
Oh,
point
nice.
about this idea, because I was thinking about getting a new cello, but I was like, but I don't know if, like, I'm feeling limited kind of, and I don't know if it's like I should just practice more or whatever. And he was like, hey, if you gave me, a chisel that you just dug out of the ground that's been buried there for 100 years, you can't expect me to make anything decent with that. But if you gave me like a $500 Japanese chisel that just got made and just got sharpened, you can expect much better from me. But it's the same person, it's the same thing. So I think it's entirely legitimate to call into question the quality of the instrument, and it can be really limiting. I mean, I don't know about your cello, but like, it could, a lot of the times, like the eBay cellos, like the action's super high. Well, that's really limiting. Like, there's just a point where like it doesn't matter who you are, you just can't play with action that's that high. So yeah, totally valid.
Yeah.
Totally valid. I would say, man, I mean, COVID withstanding, I guess, you know,
Right.
you can always just go into shops and be like, I'm really curious about cellos. I'd really like to test one out, and they'll help you out, and you can get an idea of what's out there and the price point. Luckily, like, string instrument salespeople tend not to be really pushy, because they know it's not like you're trying to sell someone like a $20 thing of fucking makeup or something, like, so
Yeah. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
tend not to be really pushy. And you can get some information from that. So I think that would be a good plan for you. Cause I think just like watching you play the cello in a little bit of a limited way, because there's not a ton of footage of you out there doing it.
Right.
You've got a pretty good approach so far. Actually, you've got a really good approach so far. Um,
Okay.
and
I
so
watched some YouTube videos on how to hold it, and no, I literally did. I literally did
no, I'm sure
before
you did.
filming
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
for
So
especially for the most recent songs.
yeah.
Yeah,
So you've got an idea of like kind of like what it feels like to play these things. So
because
pick up.
YouTube is a thing now.
Yeah. I do question a lot of the sort of instructional stuff on YouTube. Um,
Yeah.
there's this whole. You've seen the ads for like Simply Piano,
No,
dude.
I don't see ads. I don't watch ads.
It's bad, man. It's like
Yeah.
it's like they'll show a guy and he's like oh, my wife loves the piano and I've always wanted to learn to play a song for her, but I don't know how to play a piano, so I downloaded Simply Piano, and then it shows him day 1, he's going da da dee dee dee, and then it's like day 5 and he's going da, but now he's got the left hand going with chords, and then it shows like day 10 and he's got like arpeggiated left hand and he's like playing all kinds of crazy, and then it's like day 14
Yeah.
and he's playing like Moonlight Sonata, and it's like, are you fucking serious?
Full
Like,
Rachmaninoff.
yeah, right, like in 2 weeks, like no one can hope to do that, like
Yeah.
and unfortunately, a lot of people are buying into this whole like, oh, you can just like put on an app and your kid will learn to play piano like name a
Right.
guy. It's hard because without somebody there to like actually look at you and tell you, hey, this thing is happening, it can be really difficult to actually get, because you're not getting feedback with something like that. But
Yeah.
we're also talking about shit that's aimed at like 9-year-olds versus like an adult coming to an instrument with a little bit more maybe of a rational approach. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I ideally I would just, not spend money on stupid stuff for a month and then spend money on like a nice cello.
when you
you
figure
know?
out how to do that, Pete, please let me know. I'd love to know how to do
Yeah.
that.
Well, stupid stuff is a lot of fun. That's the problem.
It's true, man. It's true. It's too easy to blow
Yeah.
money. I almost bought a hurdy-gurdy a couple months ago.
Uh-huh.
I almost spent
I,
like
I see
2,000.
no valid reason why not.
Well, because it was like $2,000, which was like all the money that I had at the time. But I almost did it. I was
That's
like,
that's pretty valid.
I was
Yeah.
about to hit checkout. I shit you not. I was about to hit checkout. And I was like, this is dumb. This is really
Yeah.
dumb. But I want one. I want one so bad. Dude, you should get one. I think like it would fit your style really, really well.
My roommate bought a shamisen.
Oh
He
yeah.
he doesn't play
The
any other
Japanese thing.
instruments, but got really excited. Yeah, got really excited and bought like a handmade shamisen. It's actually really cool.
That's dope.
And to be honest, I haven't messed with it yet. But it would actually be pretty cool to like set it up, because like the funny thing about that thing is like you have to take it apart each time. Like you
Oh,
don't leave
really?
it stringed up. Like you
Oh
don't
shit.
leave the bridge in. I don't know why. Yeah, but I mean, I guess that's just you probably could. It's probably, one of those things where like you
Mhm.
could just leave it in there and it'd be
Mhm.
fine. But
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. But for whatever reason, so like yeah, it's sort of in a state where it's not playable. So you have to kind of set it up every time you play it. And I've never really messed with it, but it's a cool instrument. Like I really like the way it sounds. So like just sort of plucky and
Yeah.
like short.
Yeah. Is that
But
3 strings? They have 3 strings, right?
uh, maybe it's 3 or 4. I honestly I don't remember. I think you might be right. I think it's a 3. Um, Yeah, I don't remember. I don't know.
Shamisen or a samisen literally means 3
Yeah.
strings. Yeah, it's got 3 strings.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also got a really big like plectrum, right? Like it's
Like a
not like a
plectrum.
little
Yeah.
guitar pick. It's like
It's
a big like
yeah.
wide thing you
The
hold,
big
right?
fat boy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
It's
your whole. Yeah.
well, it's like on guitar, a lot of the pick motion is like in finger and wrist. It's not like the arm, right? Like the arm sort of motion is the strumming motion, but the picking is here.
Hmm.
Um, but
Right.
it's all in the wrist for the shamisen. At least for the videos that I
Yeah.
watch, it's all this thing, and not
Yeah.
any sort of like more fine motor skills as far as like the fingers go.
Right.
And does it have frets either? No, it doesn't have frets, does it?
Um,
It doesn't
I
look
don't
like it.
know
I'm looking
actually.
at some
I
pictures.
don't know.
It doesn't look
I
like it
haven't I
does.
haven't actually played it. Yeah.
They're
But it
so
looks
cool
really
looking.
cool. Yeah.
God, they're so cool. Those big ass
It's pretty
pegs.
wild. There's this Japanese band that's called Wagaki band, and it's basically like taking Japanese folk music and putting it over like a rock kind of like punk sort of feel to it,
I think I know
similar
these
to like
guys.
flogging Molly with Irish music, but it's like Wagaki band is like Japanese. And so there's a guy that's playing the shakuhachi, and there's like a this girl playing the shamisen. There's like a koto. It's so cool. And I actually won tickets to go to a Wagaki band concert
Oh hell yeah!
just randomly, and it was on like a Monday night too, and I heard I was it was announced that I won the tickets on Sunday evening, and so I was like it's literally tomorrow, like how I gotta take a train to the city like at 4 p.m. I gotta leave work early, you know what I mean? But my buddy was like, dude, I just looked at a YouTube of Wagaki band, we gotta go see this. And I was like, all right, yeah. And so we went, and it was incredible, like it was super cool.
What's that really famous taiko drumming band? Um,
Uh, Probably,
Kodo.
I don't
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
Kodo. So they've
Okay.
been to Denver a couple of times, and every single time, by the time I hear they're coming, everything is fucking sold out, and I've never been able to go. I think
Yeah.
they've been here. I think at least 3 times that I know of since I've moved here. Um, dude, that would be incredible. Like, can you imagine like have you ever seen videos of these guys, Kodo, like taiko drumming?
No, no,
No. Okay.
no.
So it's
Like I know what taiko drumming is, but I haven't seen it.
So it's just like there's so many people. It's so many drums. Like it's like 15, 20 people drumming at one time. And some of these drums are like as tall as a person. Like the head is like as tall as a person. I can't imagine what that
Oh,
feels like. Like it has to be a physical thing when you're like next to it, right? Like
yeah,
this little guy.
yeah, yeah.
This is a Balinese kendong, and there's this is gonna be super super loud. There's one tone which is
Nice.
so you have your hand here, and
Yeah,
you get this kind of plot sound, probably peaking like crazy. Um, dude,
yeah.
even
That's good.
that's a tiny one. That's a really really small version of it. That thing just is so like I can feel it in my chest, and that's a really high pitched thing. This lower tone too. This guy,
Hmm.
like you can feel it like in your stomach.
Yeah,
Imagine a drum like the size of a person. What does that feel like?
yeah. Well,
Huh?
so there was what used to be my favorite band before I got so into perfume that it's now my favorite band. But what used to be my favorite band was this band called Anathallo. They
Mhm.
came from Michigan, and their big thing was that they had horns and they had the guitar and piano, and it was very like music school nerd kind of composition, but they had these big giant bass drums, like the kind you'd find in an orchestra. Like it's
Mm.
taller than the
Yeah,
person,
yeah.
and they would just be beating this thing with a mallet. Um and so they would just have them on stage, and like when they were ramming it, in the middle of like a peak of the song, like you could feel it. And I
Yeah.
remember seeing them in a really small venue in like North Jersey, and yeah, it's still like such a great experience. So yeah, I mean, I can totally imagine, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
hard
What
hard
how do you
percussion is very good. Percussion is very important.
how do you spell this band name?
Um, Anathallo, Anathallo.
Ithalo. Hell yeah. I see Floating World. Is that one of
Yeah,
their albums?
Floating
Saved.
World is yeah, yeah,
Oops. Not saved. I fucked up. The next yeah, the suggested album after this is Tycho. Dive.
yeah. There
Do
you
you
go.
do you know
Big
Tycho?
hits. No, no, no. I don't know what it is, but I've never listened to it.
No. Oh, yeah. So this is confusing because there's taiko drumming. There's also taiko the band, which is Tycho.
Right.
They're like
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
instrumental atmospheric group. They're great. They're awesome. I actually got to see them live one time. It was fantastic. Um, so speaking of you were talking about like this big orchestral bass drum. When I was an undergrad, we were playing. My university orchestra was playing the Verdi Requiem, and uh,
Mhm.
around the same time, the symphony in the city where I grew up, Jacksonville, Florida, the Jacksonville Symphony Orchestra was also playing Verdi's Requiem. So before our concert, like the week before, we went like and saw them perform this, which is fantastic. And we actually got to sit in the choir loft. So I was actually on the like. You're looking at the stage. I was on the right side, which is where the percussion ensemble was set up,
Mhm.
and I was actually behind the orchestra a little bit. And in the Dies Irae, there's this whole section with bass drums, boom, and this motherfucker had two bass drums on either side of him and two mallets, and was just sitting here going bam, 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 just wailing on these things. And it was first of
Yeah.
all, it just looked badass. It was like the most badass
Right.
orchestral thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. Like
Um,
the hammer.
yeah, but I was also sitting slightly behind these drums. So it was like I remember distinctly whenever he would hit the drums, I couldn't hear anything else. In that brief moment, I could only hear the drum hit. And it was, yeah, it was nuts. It absolutely blew my mind. I could feel it like in my heart, like in my chest, like a physical, like I felt my ugh.
Yeah, so just to let you know, my AirPods just died.
Oh shit, I'm sorry.
So I don't know, the sound quality might be different.
I can actually hear you just as well. My only fear would be that we would get some echo, but it's fine. If that happens, we will deal with it.
Yeah. Is it good?
Yeah, no, it's not bad actually. It's honestly, I doesn't even feel like anything's changed.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I probably didn't charge my boys long enough, but
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine,
oh,
man. Um, so how has Invalids been impacted by the pandemic? Did you guys have any tours or anything that ended up getting canceled or?
yeah, it's funny because like we last played together as a band, all four of us in August of last year, and that was the last time we were all together. And we played Arctangent Festival in the UK, and it's this festival that's very much kind of like designated towards like math rock and kind of like not so much the norm sort of rock music and things that are into alternate time signatures and stuff, and just
Mm,
kind of a little bit like nerdy kind of stuff. And
mm.
this big festival, and it was such an amazing experience. But then after that, I actually went to Australia for 3 months because of my job. So
Oh wow.
basically, like we went on this tour, and then I came home, and then immediately flew to Australia, and I was gone for 3 months. So then I came back to the U.S. at the end of the year, and then it was basically like maybe a month or two before everything started to shut down.
Mm.
So literally, like my guitar player and drummer, I haven't seen them since August of last year. So it's
Oh
literally been over a year since I've even seen half of my band.
wow.
So yeah, I mean, it's been tough, but at the same time, like we are right now focusing on writing a new album,
Mm.
and so which is primarily I write the music, and so like I've been working on it, but it's very slow going because my work so yeah, other than that, it's okay. I mean, everyone's kind of understands that it's going to take a while before we kind of get back to it. I did do a couple of like so our guitar player Brock Benzel does a lot of Twitch streaming, where they talk about music, and a lot of they're also very nerdy and into like music theory, went to Berkeley, this kind of stuff. And so their Twitch stream is very much about like analyzing music and music composition,
Is
stuff like
his
that. And
is
so I've gone on,
is his
yeah, I've
is his
gone on that.
is his Instagram handle at MathBrock?
Math Brock.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I know this guy.
Math
It's
Brock.
funny.
Yeah.
The algorithm
Yeah.
actually suggested him to me a couple of days ago. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. So they actually just posted a video of a new song that we have, just learning the guitar part. And I'm very excited to get that recording and mix everything together. So, because kind of like still how Invalids works is that like I write all the music and then I send it to everybody, and everybody learns their part and then sends it back to me, and I mix it all together. And uh, it's very exciting when like each individual person like sends me a track, and then I can put it into the mix, and it's like, oh yeah, it's becoming more and more real, like as time goes on. It's no longer MIDI, it's like real
So
people doing it.
you're writing everything for Invalids.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's still basically the same kind of the same type, because Invalids essentially started as a solo project.
Mm-hmm.
I started kind of basically, I played guitar for like 20, I don't know, like 21 years at this point.
Time.
It's a long time.
Let's call it a long ass time. How about that?
Yeah. But basically in like 2008, I stopped using a pick. And so everything I do on a guitar is with my fingers. And so then from there, I started doing like tapping stuff, and I started writing songs for this. And for a few years, I had a friend of mine from the internet named Nick Shaw, who I've still never met in person. But I had a friend of mine kind of record the bass for me, and I would record like the drum. I would program the drums on my computer, and I would record both guitar parts. He would record the bass. I would record all the vocals, and that's how he put together the first two Invalids albums, and the 202nd EP and the Top Secret Area EP.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So I haven't. You have 4 videos on your channel, which are where you're walking through. I've only watched like the first 10 minutes of the first one, but where it seems like you're walking through. They're called programming drums for Invalids, so I assume
right. Yeah.
That's what you're doing. Yeah. So that's like you opened the first video talking about Tabit.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, so with like the drum stuff is what fucks with my head, because like if I was like I'm trying to think of like if I was writing all of the parts for like a band with 2 guitars and a bass and a drum, it's the drum that would really mess me up. Like I know what drums sound like, I know what good drum beats are like, but like I don't think I've ever like sat down and tried to like put together a drum beat in like that kind of really digital way, especially not something, for something like Invalids, which is, complicated to say the least. Right. So that actually brings me to like another question that I have, which is,
right.
Math rock is kind of one of the things that kind of goes into the definition of math rock is this very complex approach to time, right? It's not just like, let's have a 4/4 grid. We just put everything in that and whatever. All of your music, like even your solo stuff, has it's not so straightforward time wise, right? It's not just all in 4/4. So how does that come about for you? Like, do you sit down and think like this series is sort of like 3/3/3/2 is really cool, so I'll do whatever, or is it, or like how do you end up with these things that are like relatively complicated if you want to like quantify them, but actually are kind of like they're actually really really groovy once you get to know them? Like, what's the process for figuring that stuff out for you?
Right. So for me, the big thing is first establishing a pattern, and then to me, what's most interesting is how you deviate from that pattern. So then the idea is, okay, let me give you a section of a song where there is a defined pattern in the background, but only we know the pattern, and we're only giving you various deviations from that pattern. And so what the end user hears is all very much like not exactly what's going on in the background. It's like you're shown like a very specific alternate of kind of what the simpler song might be. You know what I mean? So a big thing for me is like if you start listening to a lot of math rock, you'll find that a lot of bands will kind of, they'll start with something where, okay, they'll think of like a really cool riff in 7/8, and they'll play it, and then they'll play that just 4 times in repeat, and then they'll think of the next really cool riff, and they'll play that 4 times, and then they'll think of the next cool riff, and they'll play that 4 times. So my goal is to, okay, well, let's break that up even further. Okay, let me think of that cool riff in 7/8, but how about the third time it's in 6.5/8, right? We eliminate half a beat.
Right.
Or let's say like, like the entire song, every other measure is 1 beat longer, something like that. It's this experimental, very like nerdy idea of like, okay, let's take a non-musical idea of some sort of mathematical sequence. Like let's add a beat every other measure, or let's add a beat every 4 measures. I don't know, something like that, right?
This is great. Sorry,
how can you make that sound cool?
I'm really, really sorry to interrupt you, because I want to hear the next bit of your thoughts. But this idea of like what you just said about like, let's take something and then like the third time or whatever X amount of time, do something different, like drop a beat. So I actually have what I wrote out from when I was trying to figure out like the actual like rhythm, like the time for that breakdown in Let Every Evil Lung Fill. And it's after the vocals, you have a 6-line sort of like the way that I wrote it out is it's kind of is like 6 lines. The first 2 lines are the same. The third line is completely different. The fourth line is also completely different from everything else. The fifth line is the same as the first and second, and then the sixth line is the same as the third. And all you're doing in the third and sixth lines is dropping the threes. There's no 1 2 3 1 2 3. It's just all twos. It's just straight. So that's awesome. That kind of maybe validates my my interpretation a little bit, but that's what I come up with as far as like actually hearing the sort of breakdown. And then you to kind of like think of the idea of like dropping a beat in a different way. Not only are you taking sort of these smaller sort of cells that are sort of in 3 3 1 1 1, or sorry 3 3 2 2 2. You've got 5 beats for each of those lines. 3 3 2 2 2 is one line, but then the fourth line is just 4 beats instead of 5. It's 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2. Sorry, it's 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. Is that how you feel it? I don't know if that makes any sense at all. What
yeah, no, it's 100% how I feel it. Yeah, okay, because great. It's like you said cells. I use the term blocks. I think in terms of blocks. So I will, and it's very much similar. I realized recently it's similar to like Turkish additive rhythms, or I don't know if you know Tigran Hamasyan.
Tigran Hamasyan, yeah.
Yeah.
Shadow Theater is one of my absolute favorite albums of all time.
Same. So like the idea of additive rhythm. So we get like, like 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1, like no, sorry, I did the same thing over. Like 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3. Like like it's all different, right?
Yeah.
And so this idea of this additive rhythm that all adds up to one basic block. That was kind of the idea. I didn't really know how to articulate it at that point, but the entire idea behind Let Every Evil Lung Fill was like, how can I take, I believe it was 17/8. If you take the entire section and you take the cumulative amount of it, I believe it's 17 beats. Okay. And how do you make it like, okay, how can I divide it? And can I possibly make it so that it only feels natural as 17? That was my attempt in writing that song. I don't know if I achieved it, but like doing the various subdivisions, because the subdivisions are not the same each time.
Right. Yeah.
But I wanted the whole thing to be like almost like confusing the ear to to not know what's going on until the end of that 17 kind of clinched it, and you're like, okay, this section is done, and now we've moved on, right?
Oh yeah, dude.
Um,
The arrival to the next section after that little breakdown is so satisfying. Da da da. It's
mhm,
so good. It's so simple. Da da da. Right.
yeah,
But yeah, it feels like, yeah, this is done. Like, even if you don't know, even if you're not able to articulate in some way of like writing it down or saying threes and twos, who gives a shit about that? But just feeling it and listening to it. I actually, I remember listening to that a bunch of times, just that little section, just being like, I'm so fucking confused, but that da 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 feels so good. It feels so good. Yeah, it was great. It was
perfect.
great. No, it's
Yeah.
it's awesome. You know, this I think goes back to what you were talking about with like your sort of the way that you got introduced to music was just this sort of sandbox thing. And so um I think that I think that music is language. I don't think that music is a language, but music is language. Um we don't learn language in the way that we tend to learn music, right? It's like when you were like when any of us were super super little and we first started speaking and we were like ka, you know, our mom and dad didn't go, no, it said it's cup. Put the put the it's cup. No one said that. They were like,
Yeah.
yeah, ka ha ha, whatever, and then they said it back, and we learned without having any sort of, we weren't caught up in the idea of what other people thought of us attempting to learn. Like we were just learning, we were just playing.
Yeah.
Um, and so what that leads to is like is people who can, I mean, you can speak without being able to read or write at all. Like you could speak very eloquently, I'm sure, and very well and very convincingly without being able to like really talk about what you're doing. And it's that kind of gulf between the actual doing and the actual sort of description or the analytic side of it. Um, and I love that there's sort of this feeling in your music of like, it's complicated, it's complex. It's not like you can just listen to it and go, cool, that was 1 4 5 1, cool, I can move on. Um, but it works. Like there's a language behind it. There's an ebb and flow and sort of a tension and release. And you know, even if you don't really know how to like actually talk about it, um, it's there and it works. You know, uh,
Mhm.
and it works for me particularly well. Um, one of the things that that I'm curious to hear your perspective on is this idea of like music and language. Like how does that interact? How does that intersect? Like, um,
Mhm.
what do you think about the saying, the sort of thing that people bandy around, that music is the universal language? What's your thoughts about that? I'm just very curious.
Uh, Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm happy you said tension and release because my guitar player Brock of Invalids um, basically has told me, and I 100% agree with it, is that music is entirely this binary system of tension and release.
Mm.
And it may be various different kinds of tension and various different kinds of release. It may be melodic, it may be rhythmic, anything. But the entire idea is tension and release, and that's how you create dynamics. And I completely agree with this. And I think it's really interesting because I would imagine somebody that has not grown up and that is not accustomed to listening to very typical music may very well not have the same kind of interpretation of what melodic elements are doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So like if we think of music as a language, if I put minor chords, or if I put, like the harmonic minor third or whatever, you know what I mean? Like into a scale, like it has this certain feeling to me, and it has this certain feeling to most people because
Yeah.
we've all grown up listening to the same kind of, like, we know what like a fugue sounds like. We
Mm-hmm.
know what, like kind of, old castle music of like the 1800s. Like we have this idea of what it sounds like, right? But like, I don't know. I imagine somebody who has grown up in some place where, European castles are not a
A thing.
relevant
Yeah.
thing. Like maybe they won't hear it the same way.
You
And so
are
like
you
that's
are you are entirely spot on, and I can actually I can give you an actual real world example of this.
mhm.
So I played four notes. that's, pretty much anyone would be like, that's a minor pentatonic scale. If you wanted to qualify it in some sort of emotional content, like, what do you think this is? Like, what's the sort of emotion or character between those four notes?
Uh-huh.
What do you think?
I mean, to me, it's very like daytime, like major, like getting stuff done.
Yeah.
But to me, I hear it as like a language. It's like 1, 2, 3, 5, 3, 2, 1. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
I
yeah.
hear it like that. I hear numbers.
Yeah. So for like, regardless of the sort of like analytical labels you might put on it, this idea of like it's bright, it's major, there's motion to it, that's an entirely Western complex. In Balinese traditional music, there's a variety, which is called gamelan. There's a variety called angklung, and angklung has what appears to Western ears to be something very, very similar to those four notes. But the emotional quality ascribed to that scale, to that mode, is it's almost exactly opposite what we would think in the West, because that ensemble, that angklung, that tuning is associated with funeral rites and cremations. And so when a Balinese person hears that scale, instead of hearing bright and happy and daytime and getting stuff done, what they hear is like melancholy. They hear bittersweet. They hear sadness and loss. It's directly opposed to what we ascribe emotionally, characteristically to those four notes. I don't know how that connected to what you said earlier, but I don't know if I completely derailed the conversation with that. But
no, the idea of music as a language, right? So like that, somebody who grew up in a different culture and a different environment,
right,
might see the exact same notes, the same representation of music, and have a totally different feeling of it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that's really cool. Because I think we, and also, we could take that same note, that same sequence, right? If we took your same sequence, so you play, 1, 2, 3, 5, 3, 2, 1. If you put a pedal tone of a sharp 5 over that, right? I don't know what scale you were in, but that was what the G string, right? G A B D B A G. Is that what you played?
It was a D major, so D E.
A D major, yeah. So if you put like an A sharp underneath it, so if you put just a pedal tone of an A sharp underneath, it just has this tension, this sort of like, the stuff on top is not, it's not quite representative of what we're trying to say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fascinating. That goes back to what you were talking about earlier with that musical paradise, having this pedal point that completely alters what you're hearing above it. What if you just forgot the pedal point, what you're hearing above it might, I don't know the musical, but it might be construed as one particular way, but then the pedal point drastically it's one additional note, but it drastically changes the way that you experience that melodic structure, right?
Yeah. So I really like the idea of including notes that are not within the scale, right?
That makes sense, because
the idea of incidentals, but like really focusing on that, and like in what ways can you use a note that doesn't belong and make it sound like it belongs? How can you convince somebody that it belongs?
I
right?
love that.
That's very interesting to me lately.
That's such like a problem solving mindset, and you're posing the problem to yourself. I shouldn't say, maybe problem is a bit of a loaded word. It's like a puzzle solving mindset. Like you're posing a puzzle to yourself and you're attempting to like solve it. That's awesome, man. I mean, it's like that's the way I think people should be thinking about music. A lot of people who are, who get into playing music and who want to study and learn about music, it's like that there's this sort of canon, there's this sort of, it's written on a tablet somewhere, and if you deviate from it, but fuck that. It's like it's all just made up, and I don't say that lightly. It's all just made up, but it's still really, really meaningful. But there's always something new to be discovered with music. I mean, we've been doing, as a species, we've been doing this for potentially before we were even humans. I mean,
Right.
and we're always coming up with something new. Like, there's never a point when you can say nothing changed from here on out. It's like
Yeah.
everything's constantly changing, and like in every avenue. Um, I mean, the 20th century is, I think, like the best example of this, because you get, Schoenberg and Schenker and even Rachmaninoff playing around with things that are really atypical, that are not that are sort of, they're almost intentionally going for things that are not correct, that shouldn't work
Yeah.
this way. Um, and
Do you know Ioannis Xenakis?
yeah, Xenakis. Yeah, I love Xenakis.
Yeah.
Yeah, Xenakis is
That was
weird
one of
shit,
my
man.
favorites.
Yeah, Xenakis is weird, man. That's like I want to do like DMT and listen to Xenakis. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, it's like scary.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Sometimes I'll
Penderecki.
put that on, like if we're driving real late at night in the van, and like if I'm not the one driving, like I'll put it on to
Yeah.
just kind of scare the drive.
Toss on some Penderecki, man. Threnody for the victims of Hiroshima. You ever heard that?
No, I haven't. I haven't.
I think it was actually one of the inspirations for the soundtrack for 2001: A Space Odyssey. That really
Okay.
clustery high vocal thing. I think that was yeah. I think that. Let me see. You spell Odyssey, doesn't matter. Google will correct me. So the Threnody was written in 1960. Yeah, so that lines up for 2001.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then Ligeti as well, Giorgio Ligeti. Yeah, this kind of like really clustery, dense. Um, uh, like you cease to even like really conceive of harmony at a certain point with the way that these voices are layered. There's a bit
Yeah.
of chance associated too with that score. Like when you look at it, it's really really strange, because you're like, some people are gonna hold this note, but some people are gonna kind of go down from it. But it's not like he gives you a sequence of notes. He just sort of writes a squiggly line and says, sort of go down roughly, a fifth or something. And so it's
Yeah.
entirely up to the performer, and as far as pitch goes. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I,
dude,
I really like that. I like the idea of like transcending like the singular notes to achieve a texture. You know what I mean? Just like a texture of sound, and that's why I love cluster chords so much. Like Eric Whitfield. But I took one choir course in college because I needed the credits. And so I was like, well, you know what? I took choir in high school and junior high. Like, let me take a quick choir course in college because like it'll be fun. And we sang this song called "Water Night" by Eric Whitacre, and I was
Yeah,
so blown away by it. It was such an amazing song, and like we did it as like a group, and we all stood in a circle and like sang it, and just like everything that there were chords that were like 15 notes that are all like one note apart, like
yeah,
just this
yeah,
enormous cluster chord.
yeah,
And I just remember thinking like that was so cool. Like, let me try that. So that was a big influence for like False Friends EP, because there's major cluster chords and everything. And basically from then on it changed the way I thought about music, because
mm,
now I really love cluster chords, and like
yeah,
how can you
yeah,
like how can you convey an idea in a very, very foggy, muddled way and still have something emerge from it,
yeah, yeah,
that's clear,
yeah.
right? And I love that kind of thing.
I remember seeing like this, like talking about like how to move into and out of situations is a really, I think, underappreciated conversation topic, because um, it seems like we can get so focused on the quality of a given chord and whatnot, but what's more important is how you move into or away from it. When I was at DU for my master's degree, I actually, Yo-Yo Mod came and did a master class, a chamber music master class with two quartets, and one of the quartets he was working with was playing the string quartet by a guy named Arensky, who I think you'd be really, really into if you'd ever listened to him, because he likes some clustery things. And in the first movement of the Arensky, there's all these there's these statements by the whole ensemble, and then there's extended periods of silence, and he actually notates like, hold this out really, really long. It's not just like here's a rest and a fermata. It's like, he tells you to hold these out for multiple measures of rests. And one of the things that Yo-Yo Ma talked about so much with that particular masterclass, with that particular group, was how to get into and out of silence. Like, silence itself is just silence. There's nothing you can do besides not play. The AC is going to go. People are going to rustle. You can't control that. But how you get into it and how you get out of it is incredibly important. How do you set the listener up to experience the silence? And so this idea of like, you can have a chord that's super clustered. Maybe it's all half steps for 2 octaves, 24 notes. It's all half steps. How you get into that and how you get out of that has just as much of an impact of what the listener experiences than the actual chord itself. It's not just the pitches, right? It's the movement that's really important. And so like listening back through your discography, like False Friends really is kind of like the first time that you really start to hear these really dense, clustery vocal harmonies. You move into and out of them really well. So I'm thinking about I'm so bad with song titles. I promise you I've listened to this album more than once. I promise you I'm so bad with song titles.
Track numbers.
Track numbers
are
not good for me either. I put it on and listen, and I go do something else. I don't sit there and like look and memorize the fucking name. Is it What Does Your Heart Do? No. It's the acapella one from Pottsville. Is it what does your blood do? Which actually is
what does your blood do?
Which is another question I want to ask you, but we'll get to that in a second. What does your blood do is entirely acapella, right? And right before the I carry it all, whatever, like the chorus. You have these sort of punctuations of these really clustery chords and like sort of the upper harmony. And that to me was like that track was where I went, okay, this guy's really thinking about how to get out of these clusters. You're not just thinking about the clusters itself and going, oh, this is cool. Anybody can just play a shit ton of notes on a piano and go, I like the sound of that. How you get into it, how you get out of it is just as important. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you was, there's a similar sort of title, like naming structure between What Does Your Heart Do and What Does Your Blood Do? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, I mean, basically those 2 tracks are both very much about the same character. And this idea of like, what does your heart do? What does your blood do? There's a line in the song, What Does Your Heart Do? The 3rd track. There's a line at the end that says, what does your blood do as it leaves you?
Oh, yeah.
And then it goes on to talk about somebody like losing blood and dying. And basically that sort of phrasing for how to ask that question, I really liked. And so I played around with it a lot. And and that's kind of where I was going with it. And so then when I wrote What Does Your Heart Do first, and then wrote What Does Your Blood Do later, sort of as a reference to the first track, to track 3. And then that's kind of more about the inner turmoil of the sort of father figure and everything. I'm trying to remember like at what point, because there's 16 tracks on that album, and I'm trying to remember like what order I wrote them. You know what I mean? But I remember What Does Your Heart Do was one of the earlier ones. The very first one was actually the first track. That was the first thing I wrote. That There Is Notion, and everything else came after that. But I mean, what Does Your Blood Do was, I want to say, one of the later songs, after I had written like most of it, and I always write the last track for an album at the end, just because like I feel like then you can you tie
Summarize.
everything up, and
Yeah.
it has, it feels right if
Yeah.
you just write that last,
Right.
you know. Um, but yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. Yeah. I don't think you could have picked a better first track than There's an Ocean. I mean, when when I first started listening to that album, I listened to False Friends a couple times, and I was super into it. I don't want to diminish the experience I had with that album for sure. Um, it was Pottsville that made me go, I really really want to talk to this motherfucker. This this is
Mm,
this is um this is something really really different and special, and something that really speaks to
mm.
me. There's something about the piano sound at the beginning of that track. It feels like my head is inside the piano. Like I can hear the pedal, I can hear the hammers, and I can hear the felt just pulling off
Yeah,
of the strings. And I
yeah.
that's
And honestly, like I'm a little bit bummed because that piano was the piano that I had for most of my life, and it was this old player piano that was converted into a playable, and it was a big upright guy. It was like wooden. It was super old, and it just had all these really creaky sounds to it,
wow, yeah.
and I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but now listening back to the recordings, like I love the ambience of it. And so like I literally, there was a microphone that I stuck into the opening where the strings are, you know what I mean? And like the sustain pedal didn't work, and so I had to fix like I fixed some sort of like weird pole to the sustain pedal to make it work, and it had this really creaky sound, and it like wasn't exactly right, but
I
like it captured everything, right? So
I
it just feels
appreciate
very,
the adventurousness of going, my sustain pedal doesn't work, let me fuck around with a piano, because if there's
yeah,
one tiny thing that's not going wrong with my cello, it goes back in its case and I take it to a luthier. Like I'm not touching it. I appreciate
yeah,
that adventurousness. There's something about
yeah,
that sound of like, it's funny that like ah, okay, I'm gonna say it this way, but I don't mean anything negative. It sounds like a shitty piano, and there's
yeah,
something about that sound that like I didn't pick it up on the first listen clearly, but on like the second and third and throughout there, it plays into this sort of like rural, um, um, like early 20th century idea of like, if there was a church buried in the hills of Pennsylvania, probably no one's tuned their piano in 10 years, and probably no one's maintained it, and it's
right.
probably creaky
Yeah,
and
it has a
oily. And there's something about that sound that
yeah,
like
it has a
sets,
backwoods feel.
yeah, it's got a backwoods feel. It's like kind of, it's almost, being a Floridian, it's almost swampy. It doesn't make sense for Pennsylvania, but it's almost swampy,
Yeah.
And I think it contributes. Maybe you didn't intend this, but I think it contributes to that, like the actual like sort of setting of the story of the album. This sort of this backwoods, rural, kind of thing that no one's bothered to maintain, but they still use all the time. Like it's still important, but they've somehow not maintained it. Um, because you can just hear, it's not just the pitches, it's like that you can hear that it feels like my head's inside the piano. It really does, especially with these.
Yeah.
These are actually pretty decent headphones. It feels like I'm sticking my head into the fucking piano. And
Well,
it's
and so in terms of technique, in terms of like recording technique, I actually whenever I would record piano with that specific instrument, I would record two different tracks, and if I had something that was on the lower register, I would have the mic in a specific placement, and I would record that. And then if I had a higher register, I would change the mic
mm,
placement and record that. And so every piano thing that I did with that old instrument was two different tracks. And I think that helped to kind of give exactly what you're saying. It's like you really you sense sort of the spatial
yeah,
arrangement of the keys, because for all the low notes it's pointed this way, and for all the high notes it's pointed this way.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? So like it
right,
was a deliberate effort. The shame of it is that like that was in my old house in like super northwest Jersey. It was this super small town, super rural farm country, like empty. And then I went to college, and you know went to like an apartment, and then I started then I moved to the West Coast and stuff, and I didn't have that piano anymore.
Mm.
And so I really only used it. I think the only track I ever used it on was that first track. And
Wow, really?
because that was the first track of the album, like I can't say that it didn't influence the story of it, because I wrote that
Mm.
before I had any conception of like what the story is going to be. You know what I mean?
That makes
Like I wrote
sense. Yeah,
that just as a
as a
practice of
tune.
using lots of
Yeah,
instruments, and like that was kind of what I was into, this folky, kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
But from there, the rest of the story started to build, and I was like, okay, like let me work on like a whole album of this. So I but I agree, like just the sound of that specific instrument, that old piano, like
It's really unique.
it's a really cool sound.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
super
it's
unique.
great. Like whenever you go to like somebody's house, or like sometimes you'll go to a venue that just has this old piano and
Yeah.
it's out of tune, and maybe one or two of the strings don't work, and you just play it, and it just has this such a identity to it that it's like
It's funny with
you know
pianos because it
it
feels
just
like
has this
there's
nice quality.
with pianos it feels like there's a point where it's super in tune and it sounds great and pure and classical. Then there's a point where it's kind of out of tune and it just sounds like shit. Then there's a point where it's so out of tune
Yeah,
it starts to sound in tune again somehow.
yeah, it
Um,
gets character. Yeah.
yeah. So do you know where that piano is? Like, is it still in your
As
family's
far as I
possession
know,
or?
as far as I know, my mom sold that house that I used to live in, and included all of the furniture and everything that was inside the house, and that was in 2007. So
Wow.
as far as I know, it's still in the basement of that same house that she sold in Blairstown, New Jersey,
How can we
up in
get
the
your
mountains.
Pete? How can we get your piano back? We
I
need
don't
to get
know.
your piano back, and you need to write an album on this fucking piano. Hashtag Rescue Pete's piano. That's what we should do.
Yeah, defend 4-4, defend piano. I could drop like a postcard in their album, in their mailbox, just like, hey, does that piano
Can
still
I have
work?
my piano
Still
slash your
got it?
piano? Yeah, dude. It's yeah. That would be amazing if you ended up getting it back. Yeah, how incredible would that be?
Yeah. Well, the other thing was that, like, I had this big basement, and so basically our house was this very tall. They called it a salt box house. But basically, like the bottom was like this big square, and then there were two levels on top of it, and it was this just big tall square house. But the basement was entirely open. And so all of the reverb that's on that piano is 100% natural. It's 100% from the room.
Mm,
Like I didn't add anything. So it's
wow.
just what was picked up on the mics. And just because it was in the very center of that room, it just reflected and caught everything. So it was as much the house that it was in as it was the instrument. You know what I mean?
Wow. So was this at all an inspiration for the cover art for Pottsville? Like this house?
Uh no, not really actually. The cover art, I I don't remember where I got the idea from, but I just had this picture of like a house with a well, and the idea that there's one single window that's lit up inside the house, like there's somebody in there, but then there's something like behind the scenes that you can't see.
Right.
And I had a friend who did art. He was also a tablet guy, you know what I mean? And yeah, and I got him to paint it up for me. It was like a digital painting, and yeah, I don't remember exactly where the idea came from for the cover art for it, but yeah, I mean, he did a great job. So
Yeah, it's beautiful. I think that it matches the aesthetic of the album really, really well. Um, I've always been interested in the relationship between the album art of an album and the way that you experience it. Um,
mhm.
so like I remember having a conversation. Have you ever heard of the idea of like the key color theory, that like different musical keys have certain colors associated with them? Like it's not
Okay,
like yeah. So this is a really old idea. It dates back to like the Renaissance era. I remember talking to a friend of mine about it, and we were talking about. I'm not synesthetic at all. I wish that I was. It'd be really cool. But
right.
we were talking about the idea of like keys and colors, and he was like, well, I associate D major with red, and I was like, dude, me too. And he's like, I associate A major with yellow, and I was like, dude, me too. He's like, I associate G major with green. I was like, oh oh my God, me too, man. Are you kidding? Like, it's always these colors. And then I realized that what was happening was I had a cello concerto, which was in D major, which had a red cover. I had a Beethoven A major
Uh-huh.
sonata, which had a yellow cover, and I had
Yeah.
the Bach First G major cello suite, which is a green cover.
Yeah.
And it got me wondering of like, was my association of the colors with the keys really something to do with the different properties of these different keys, or was it something to do with the fact that I had the books that had the certain color cover?
Right.
And
Yeah.
we're
It's a
talking about
learned. It's a learned behavior.
like publisher, so it's entirely just this one color.
Yeah. 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 And it's funny you mentioned, because in my line of work, in flavor creation, we see exactly the same thing, right? So the idea is like, okay, if you think of what a strawberry tastes like,
It's like
right?
red, yeah.
And the single notes of a strawberry, if I give you maybe one note of a strawberry and you taste it, you'll say it tastes red. And if I give you the note that is present in the leaves of the strawberry,
You'd say
you'll say,
green.
oh, it's a very green strawberry,
Right, yeah.
right? Or if I give you the notes that make it taste like it's unripe, you'll say, oh, it's kind of white. It's
Right,
like this
yeah.
white strawberry,
Huh.
right? It's entirely learned behavior, right? It's called paresthesis, right? So synesthesia is when you literally perceive a different sense from one sense. Like you
Right,
taste
yeah.
something and you see red or you see blue, right? You literally experience. But the association, the mental association, is called paresthesis. Um, and so it's exactly the same, like you're saying, right? If you play a song and the cover is green and you play this over and over and you just associate the song with this green color, it's a parasympathetic association, a parasthetic paresthesis.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
I don't
and so
know.
and
It's
so and
it's
so
it's
you might
it's pretty
even
neat. But to be honest,
I was gonna say, so like
go on.
you might even go an extra step further and start to construct an environment or a setting for the song that includes things that would be green, like grass or trees. So like if you gave someone an album that had a green cover and asked them to like tell me the story of the album, they might actually end up having the setting being more outside or more in nature, versus like if you gave someone an album with a more brown or dark or like a white color, they might say it may be more inside because it's like the color of walls. Like my walls are like a cream color. Um, so it's like, yeah. So like to the extent to which like the album art influences the way that you listen to and experience the actual music is something I've been interested in. And so this is it paresthesis? Is that what you said? Paresthesis?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like
Paresthetic,
there's
yeah.
paresthetic, yeah. So it seems like there's actually an association between like color and like object or like meaning maybe. Huh. I guess that's why like grape Laffy Taffy is always purple, right? And never like blue.
Right, but yeah, but often that is a learned association.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? Like it's
Yeah.
because you see two things at the same time and you connect them,
Mm.
and so you get this paresthetic connection. Whereas like a synesthetic connection is totally random. Like you could taste grape and hear an F, or an
Right.
F
Okay.
major.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you
Right.
literally hear it like that. That's what synesthesia is,
And
right?
there's no
So
reason for that. It's just
it's
that's
an
just what
interesting
your
thing
brain
that,
is doing. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's literally like your brain, like the channels that create the the sort of the signals that create these experiences. They're too close to each other, like it's physically too close to each other, and so
Oh
when
wow.
one fires, it actually affects the next one. I don't know. I've
Wow.
seen a lot of like TV programs about how synesthesia works. It's actually really interesting, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
remember
it's like
watching
it's
it. So
literally a physical glitch.
yeah, so I got really into Messiaen, Olivia Messiaen, who's a composer in the early 20th century, and Scriabin as well. Both of them were synesthetic. Both of them described their music in very, very detailed, not only colors but shapes. In the case of Messiaen, he described not only colors but shapes. And I got really interested in like, so it's obvious that I can't separate their musical output from their actual experience of music, but because I'm not synesthetic and because I'm not them, I can't have that experience. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to get more familiar with actual synesthesia. I remember watching a documentary and they interviewed a half a dozen people, and at one point they asked them all the question, like, would you rather not have this thing? And every one of them was like, absolutely not. This makes my life completely so beautiful. Like I can't imagine not having this association with color and music and experience and objects and all this kind of physical feelings and stuff. Like there was one guy who when he listened to music, it wasn't that he saw colors or shapes, he experienced certain physical sensations, like anything from pain to pleasure. Like physically, he was like, like when I listen to some music, it's like someone stabbing needles in my arm. When I listen to some music, it's like I'm getting a back massage. And they asked him, like, would you rather just listen to music and not have these experiences? He was like, absolutely not. I would much rather have these physical experiences because it enriches it, makes it so much more, real. Like, and it was that
Yeah.
idea of like, it makes it so much more real. Um, if you've ever done like psychedelics and listened to music, I've had the experience of psychedelics and listening to music, and I'm actually experiencing like what I think synesthesia might be, like shapes and colors, and I can see scenarios playing out behind my eyelids. Imagine that happening all the time with every bit of music you ever listen to,
Yeah.
like how much
I've
deeper would that
I've
be?
yeah, I've only dabbled with it once. I've taken LSD once, and I had a ukulele with me, and I
Mm.
remember playing chords. Um, and the experience was very unique. But I remember, like, I would play these two chords, and I would picture something that I wanted to come after it, like the third chord that would resolve it in this specific way.
Mm.
And I couldn't figure out what it was that I was trying to do at that time. And now I don't remember. But
Sure.
like, I almost wonder, like, was it a real thing that
Yeah.
was it a real target that I was trying to get to?
Yeah.
Or was it because I was clouded and I couldn't think of it? You know what I mean? I don't know.
I remember one of my first times ever doing mushrooms. I was laying on my friend's couch, and I had this old nylon string guitar, and I was just plucking single notes and just listening to them ring out.
Mhm.
And then I was just moving my hand somewhere and playing a new note, and I wasn't thinking about um, what note should come next. I wasn't thinking about a scale or anything. I was just playing a note and going, holy fuck. And then I would move my hand. I would just go, okay, I'll play this note. Bing. And I would just be like, holy fuck. There was something that was happening. Like I wasn't seeing anything. I wasn't seeing like shapes or sound or colors or anything. But um I was able to like live in the moment of one individual pitch in a way that I've never been able to before or since, really. Like
Yeah.
feels like even if I just sit down and just play an open, like I start all my practice sessions with the cello with just playing open strings. It feels like even when I do that, I'm still listening to it going, is this really in tune? Whatever. But I'm not actually enjoying it.
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
the
It's like
same
there's
way.
very intentional attention.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah, it's good. Hey, you know what? I hate to do it, but I think I gotta go to bed pretty soon.
Dude, it's fine. We are almost 3 hours into this, and you're 2 hours ahead of me. So,
Yeah.
but before we go, what's next for you? What's next for Invalids? And what should I go check out? I also would really love to hear from you. I actually have a notepad ready because I am a baby to math rock. Besides Invalids,
Uh-huh.
and of course Snooze and Delta Sleep.
Yeah.
You want to toss out some names? Like what are some bands you really really like, and what should I listen to?
Yeah. So my number one always is this it's one guy, and it is called AM Overcast. AM as in like the morning, like AM, overcast, like weather. It's one guy that has crazy ADD and writes the poppiest, mathiest stuff, and I absolutely love it. He'll give you 3 seconds of the most beautiful melody you've ever heard, and then he'll never do it again.
All right.
You know what I mean? It's
Love
just
it.
like
Yeah, I
it,
love it.
and it's just constantly changing, and I love it.
Yeah.
He's really good. Another big one for me is Terra Melos.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Terramelos. Terra Melos.
Yeah.
Their earlier stuff. There's a album called Drugs to the Dear Youth, that is very, very influential on how math rock is made. That came out in in like 2007 or something. It's really old, but really, really great stuff. But yeah, that kind of stuff. And recently I've been listening to a lot of like Tigran Hamasyan, and I actually listen to a lot of pop stuff now. So like Carly Rae Jepsen and Perfume, J-pop.
Awesome.
So yeah,
Awesome.
so that's basically what's influencing me these days.
Great.
Yeah.
What's
As for what's next,
yeah.
yeah, I'm working on writing new music. So new Invalids is on its way, and once I get access to a more consistent recording situation, I intend to finish the Hapax Lacomna for the Pete Davis solo work,
Great.
and
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd really like to keep expanding that. And honestly, talking to you has inspired me to try and put more effort into a cello, because I do really love it as an instrument, and I wish I was better at it. So
Well, listen,
maybe
man.
I'll do more cello stuff in the
Hit
future.
hit
Yeah.
hit me up anytime, dude. I am so happy to like just spend some time with you and play some cello, even over the internet. We're so lucky to have uh what we have now as far as just the internet and computers, and um I really want to take advantage of that. So anytime you want to sit down and work on some cello stuff, I am super happy, dude. Like I've gotten so much
Yeah.
out of your music. The least I can do is give you an exercise or two. That's the least that I can do.
Cool. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
listen,
Sounds good.
listen, Pete, I really appreciate it, man. I'm still very surprised that you agreed to sit down and talk with me, not because of whatever, but just because it was a bit. I was drunk as fuck, and I was like, I want to talk to Pete Davis. So I sent you a Facebook message, bugged you on your Facebook, and you said yes, and then here we are.
Nice.
And this has been really wonderful, man.
Yeah.
I
I
really
mean, come on.
appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Yeah. What am I doing?
Dude, you're doing some cool shit. I really can't overstate what your music has meant to me in the past few months. And the fact that you're willing to sit down and have this conversation is really incredible and inspiring. And I'm always gonna be a lifetime fan and follower. And I really look forward to what you and Invalids do. And I look forward to listening to more Invalids. Like I said, I've only listened to a couple of tracks. I have yet to really dive deep. So I have a lot of music ahead of me, and I really look forward to it.
Heck yeah.
Thanks.
It's only gonna get weirder.
I love it. Thank you for saying that. I love weird. So
Heck yeah.
we're about to go offline. Just stay on the Zoom for a hot second, because it's on delay. So this has been Banter House and Pete Davis. Thank you again, sir, and have a good night, whoever's listening.